between voter marked paper ballots and ballot marking devices. Each company has their own software, but the same software is used to create both ballot paper and ballot marking device ballots. Federal law requires every polling place to have at least one ballot marking device to meet the needs of voters with disabilities. Precinct scanners. There's no difference. Both voter marked paper ballots and ballot marking device ballots are scanned in the same scanner. Manufacturers, of course, have their own, each one has their own scanner, but because federal law requires you to have a ballot marking device, your ballots are going to be scanned by the same scanner, whether you marked it by hand or whether your machine filled it out. Next. Tabulation software. Again, there's no difference between voter marked paper ballots and ballot marking devices. Each manufacturer has their own software, but it's used to tabulate both paper and ballot marking devices. The same software. The paper trail, there's really no difference. Both voter marked paper ballots and ballot marking devices provide an auditable record of the voters' choices. And just as an information point, some speakers in previous meetings have suggested that they ought to be able to keep their ballot stub or a record of how they voted. Tennessee law prohibits both of those practices. Okay, the voter mark experience. It takes a little longer to process a voter using a pre-printed ballot or ballot on demand for voter marked paper ballots. Some voters are unable to mark paper ballots, and some voters are reluctant to let poll workers remove the stub from the ballot. It's also more difficult to create multilingual ballots, which are not yet required in Tennessee, but could be. The ballot marking device is very similar to the voter's current experience with one additional step. Voters need to be reminded to review their paper ballots, but we have a poll worker at the scanner and they can remind them there. Voters with disabilities. Blind voters or those with vision problems cannot vote on paper ballots. Voters with certain mobility issues find hand-marked paper ballots very difficult. Voters with disabilities do have the option of using the accessible machine, but their ballots then look different, potentially compromising the secrecy of their ballot. Ballot marking devices allow voters with a wide variety of disabilities to vote independently, and their ballots cannot be distinguished from voters without disabilities. The poll workers experience. Retrieving pre-printed paper ballots increases the chance for poll worker error. Increased time and effort to set up the voting booths because the individual booths that are necessary for social distancing are heavy. No existing ballot on demand system is suitable for use on election day in Shelby County, although it could work for early voting. Poll workers are setting up two systems because the law does require ballot marking devices for voters with disabilities. Ballot marking devices, they need cards, they provide for cards or stands. Fortunately, I'm really happy about this. All of those actually are the correct height for wheelchairs. So, our current system, not every poll worker gets a message about how to set it up correctly. Privacy sleeves are not required with ballot marking devices because a poll worker doesn't handle the voter's ballot. Early voting. Okay, voter marked paper ballots. Every single early voting location, all 26 of them, has to have every single ballot type available. In the August election, there are more than 1,000 different ballot types. There's two approaches. You can have racks and racks of preprints, or you can have ballot on demand printers. In an early voting scenario, ballot marking devices easily call up the correct ballot style for every voter. Okay, there is an impact on personnel costs between voter marked paper ballots and ballot marking devices. We estimate it would take 500 additional people between election day and early voting workers. Printing ballot on demand takes more time. There's additional security and personnel necessary to double check that the correct ballot was given to the voter. And recording and removal of the serial numbered stub does require additional people. With ballot marking devices, we don't anticipate any increase in the need for poll workers, and the process remains pretty much the same. Hacking. Okay, neither system is more secure. The type of risk simply changes. Both hand-marked paper ballots and ballot marking ballots are scanned by exactly the same digital scanner. So in the incredibly unlikely event that the scanner was hacked, both kinds of ballots would be affected. Okay, security. Ballot on demand is not an option for this county on election day. So commercial printers required for ballot printing. Serial numbers are intended to prevent fraud, but they aren't foolproof. With voter marked paper ballots, sometimes the ballot's handled by somebody other than the voter, which does provide opportunity for tampering. And as the ballot is scanned and image is stored, people have this is very secure, but if you believe that the image could be altered or the ballot gets altered after scanning, which one's correct? The original or the image? You'll never know. Ballot marking devices, realistically, tampering with voting machines would require huge effort and actual access to the machines. Most election security experts do not consider this a huge risk. Okay, COVID-19, so what's the difference? Okay, the risk is the same until you get past the signature table. At that point, then, voter marked paper ballots have more surfaces that require cleaning. You have to clean the surface of the voting booth, you have to clean the ballot secrecy sleeve, you either have to clean the pens or you have to provide disposable pens. With ballot marking devices, the voter actually in most systems never need to touch the machine. We're testing disposable styluses now. So, you know, COVID-19 is, you know, we're not sure where that's going yet. Okay, voter error. Voter marked paper ballots are ejected from scanners if the ballots contain voter errors such as scribble marks, two selections in the same race, no mark on one or more races, the mark is too light for the scanner to detect, the ballot is blank, or one side's not completed. You don't have that with ballot marking devices. The voter cannot select more than two candidates. I mean, one candidate that's a vote for one race. It can be forced to program to force the voter to page through all the races, which assures that a voter's intent to skip a race was what they meant and not a mistake. Okay, other things that are required for voter marked paper ballots. You have to have lanterns for voting booths in case of a power outage. Ballot marking devices come with their own lights so voting can continue. Those will cost about $7,150 to buy. You have ballot secrecy sleeves. Normally you need 4 per voting booth, but in the time of COVID-19, you have to allow for claiming, so 8 per voting booth, and that's an outlay of $81,000. You have to buy staplers and pens. Prior to COVID-19, we bought nicer pens because it was easier for the voter to use a better pen. These cheapo stick pens sometimes have a little bit of difficulty, but if we go with a disposable pen approach, we buy 4.8 million pens over 14 years. That cost $431,000. Okay, life cycle costs. Voter marked paper ballots increase operating costs in several ways. Labor. More poll workers are required for both early voting and election day. It takes more people to either print ballots on demand at early voting, or on election day, you need to have more security and you have to do the whole process with a perforated stub. Increased printing costs. The coordinator rarely approves printing less than 55% of the registered voters for most elections and usually requires 70% of the presidential preference primary because you can never, ever, ever, ever run out of ballots. Many of those ballots would be thrown away, but, you know, you do it anyway. Voter marked paper ballots require some supplies not required by ballot marking devices. Staplers, staples, pens, secrecy sleeves, and there are more surfaces to be cleaned, so you need more cleaning supplies. More storage space is required as both the used and unused ballots have to be saved for the required 6 or 22 months. Shredding costs go up because more paper has to be shredded when we're done with them. So what do costs differ between the two systems? Vendors charge an annual license fee based on what you have. So if you have more ballot marking devices, you're going to pay part of the license fee. If you have more ballot on demand, that's going to change your annual license fee. Voter marked paper ballots do require you to do ballot printing. You have to buy ballot paper for early voting. You have to buy printer consumables for early voting. You need additional labor. You need supplies, pens, batteries, staples, cleaning materials, more surfaces to be cleaned, and shredding of unused ballots. Ballot marking devices vary in cost by the number of ballot markers you have. You have to replace the batteries in ballot marking devices every 5 to 7 years. You have differing amounts of ballot stock, but in ballot marking devices, you're only buying and paying for the amount of stock you use. You have disposable styli and cleaning materials. Okay, my recommendation is that the contract be awarded to Company 1. It was the top choice of 6 of the 7 members of the scoring team. The 7th member ranked them 1 point lower than their first choice. The base price of the system was Company 1 was the lowest as determined by purchasing. Company 1 offers both ballot marking devices and voter marked paper ballots. My recommendation is I recommend the purchase of ballot marking devices for a number of reasons. We struggle to find election day workers as it is. Having to find 500 more of them would be difficult. Ballot marking devices better serve people with disabilities. Ballot marking devices are easier for poll works. Setting up 2 systems is more difficult. Ballot marking devices just require a few people. Ballot marking devices have excellent security. The chances of hacking are extremely low. And there's approximately $9 million in savings over 14 years, despite the higher upfront cost. In additional phases, I'm not sure everybody knows that there are other things that will fall under this project, but they are not being discussed today. One is the poll book replacement. It is time to replace our ancient poll books. We have to make modifications to this building to build fireproof storage for the paper trail, and our server room will need to be expanded. There will obviously be voter education, preparation of training materials, and then destruction of our current voting equipment. Okay, the total cost of this phase of the ballot marking system would be $5.1 million. And the savings over the lifetime would be $9 million. Next slide. I'm going to leave this slide up so you can just look at it. Here's the quantity of things that I am recommending be purchased. Precinct scanners, there's some ballot tote bins which are required under Tennessee law. Ballot marking devices, because ballot marking devices do not store votes, the same device can be used for both early voting and election day voting. That wasn't true with our current equipment because they're storing votes. The machines that were used for early voting could not be used on election day. Everybody had a chance to look at that? Okay. Okay, so now if you wanted to go with voter marked paper ballots, it'd be a total upfront cost of $3.1 million. Next slide. And here's the differences. We still need precinct scanners. We need more ballot tote bins because there is a touch point every evening when early voting ends. And if you want to be the most secure, your ballot bin liner, you should have one for every day for every scanner at early voting. So that way a bipartisan team can remove it and seal it and bring it here for storage. That's not really a factor with paper marked ballots because they're much more difficult for poll workers to tamper with, so they can safely be removed each evening of early voting, placed in sealed transfer cases, and then brought back. Now, ballot on demand printers do require some pretty hefty universal power supplies because you can never stop voting. And so you still need voting booths. You need voting booths, but you also need ADA accessible voting booths. And the rest of that really does not change between the two systems. Okay. So the additional life cycle costs over 14 years. Voter marked paper ballots will cost $13.1 million more in operating costs, which would be labor, paper, supplies. Ballot marking devices would be 2.1 million. Now, I want everybody to understand that this is not the total cost of the election. These are just the expenses that differ by the two types. Okay, so here's the cost summary. Voter marked paper ballots. The initial purchase is 3.1 million. The building modification, because remember we need more space. The life cycle cost. It's a total investment of 16.294 million. Ballot marking devices do cost 2 million more to purchase. The building modification would be less, but the life cycle costs are considerably lower. So the savings with ballot marking devices over the 14-year life of the equipment is $9 million. Okay.
All right, I guess we'll move to public comments. Put the first speaker, please.
Mr. Chairman, are you taking public comment?
We're just about to.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that we have public comment after our discussion, because the public, that'll give them an opportunity to debate or comment on what our debate may be. They speak on the front, it's really just going to be the same thing we've already heard 1,000 times. If we debate it first and then allow for public comment before we vote, that affords them the opportunity to at least comment on that which we may say during debate. That'd be my request.
Everybody in agreement with that? You on? You in agreement with that? All right, we'll move to our discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I think I was coming out.
Yeah, I think presentation by Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One comment of the presentation, I do think I need to state some stuff for the record. This past week or so, we had a presentation that was given by our administrators to the local county commission, and I got a number of phone calls with people shouting the assertions that she had. So I just would like to state for the record some of those assertions. I will say I didn't disagree with the administrator on the remarks that she made on two levels, and I would just do it for the public the same way that I did it for the commissioners. We had a directive that was given to the administrator from Mr. Taylor when she wrote an op-ed in the paper, and Mr. Taylor advised the administrator that she was going to be giving public comments if they were going to be presented as if they were from this body, who's the governing body, that she would check with the commission, and she did not do that in this case, and as I learned it, I think she went at the request of the county commission, and nonetheless, the information that she presented was not run by the commissioners. And some of the things that she said that really rubbed some people raw in the community was the study that she did on voter error. And in that voter error study, I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you cited anywhere that you got the study from. And it was, I could characterize it maybe an informal poll, where you took and examined about 1,088 ballots, and then you did a scatter of the ballots by zip code, and inadvertently presented a bunch of blank zip codes as the zip codes that had the highest number of voter errors, and that was subsequently commissioners an email that we got from the citizen that was pretty hard on the administrator. I don't know that was what you were trying to communicate. I'm not saying that you were trying to communicate that. Nonetheless, the zip codes in a local area, people know what the zip codes are. But I wanted to present for the record an actual study, and I think the county commission asked for you to submit a letter in writing, so I'll be submitting a letter along with it. But what I have is an actual study, and I sent it for the commissioners, and I guess we can do something where it's into the record. But it's from Harrison Hammer. It's an educational study where they studied the exact machines that we use now, and the scientific study concluded that the keyboard touchscreen versus a paper ballot was scientific. They gave the statistical method of how they did it, the sample sizes. From my understanding, I think, Administrator, you just counted some ballots. And I asked for this, I didn't get it, I asked for the method that you used to count it. And the reason I said is because we use 20-year-old scanning technology, so it's circa digital technology. So a lot of the things that you found, there are adjudication modules dedicated, this whole company is dedicated to jettisoning those types of straight marks. But in this particular study, there were ballot errors on machines as well. However, when there were ballot errors on the machines, the voters were selecting their own candidates. And versus the ballots that were on the hand-marked paper ballot, they were just overvoting and undervoting. And many in the election community that are incredulous of the process, they intentionally overvote and they intentionally undervote. And the reason that they did is they said, I fill out all of them, you can't take it from me. Now that's known among the voting community. So any study that is assessing voters' intent by looking at what you deem an error is problematic at best when you're trying to judge the intent of a person. However, in the study that they did, they concluded that 0.08 versus 0.16 was the statistical difference between the two. And that's virtually nothing. But when they did highlight that the problem wasn't as much as that there was no difference in voter error, but when there was an error, where the error occurred. So the error that is of significance is not actually on the piece of paper, it's in the machine. And the last thing that I want to go for, and I submitted a bunch of other studies, but for the sake of time, I know we'll be here late night. So for the sake of time, you was asked by, I think, Commissioner Ford, who I would note that his honors race was a big problem and a fiasco that happened on the machine, but maybe I'm not sure about it. That he asked you about voter fraud, and you said that 100% of all cases that were fraud cases were committed by hand-marked paper ballots. And then I offer a refute with that, and I'll go to the White House to get that one. Because they have posted on their site a study from the Brennan Center and also from, these are actual institutions that study this, so I'm not putting my finger in the wind to pick something. But the other study came from, and I'm just going to it, the other study came from, one was the Brennan Center, and the other one was from the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation documented every case from 1974. And they said that there were 1,071 proven instances of voter fraud. But they went on to categorize how they happened. So, I'm an analytics person. I do finance, write code. I know I ain't even comfortable saying that 100% of people will die. So let alone I will say 100% of anything can happen. I ain't even comfortable saying that.
Definitely 100%.
Says the mortician. But they delineate the types of cases that they documented. And they also delineate the types of fraud. and they have 9 different categories of fraud. So I find it 100% impossible that there can be 100% of voter fraud on paper when there are 9 different categories. Some of those is impersonating fraud at the polls, false registration, duplicate voting, fraudulent use of absentee ballots, I guess that would be the paper ballot, buying votes, illegal assistance at the poll, ineligible voting, altering the vote count, which would be more in line with election fraud, and ballot petition fraud. And I put some studies there, I put a bunch of links in there, and I'll submit this respectfully to the county commission, especially since I probably would have spoke very vehemently against you presenting a number like that. But the last part of it would be the seriousness of election security, because there is a groundswell and a movement, and we are being inundated by national groups who are concerned with election security. To say that all fraud is happening on paper is to say that Russia doesn't do anything credible. And I really want to speak out as a member of this election integrity community that this is a real threat. There were real instances, and we like to think that voter manipulation is somebody changing votes. It's not always changing votes. If I change your registration information and say that you already voted, then that's the fact that prevent you from voting. There are other ways to disrupt an election. And when you say that, well, the piece of paper that's generated by the ballot marking device is not going to be caught because you can play with the image, well, that's what the rise of audits are for. And our election software is going to be bound by those same rules because Section 20, if I'm right, wrong, Mr. Ryan, Police is mandating in the Tennessee Voter Confidence Act that we do mandatory audits. And these mandatory audits, and have us requirements of receiving dollars from them, is that we have to preserve ballot images. And this will be the last thing I'll say about that. With a handmark, and I'm not trying to advocate handmark paper ballots at this point, even though I will be doing it when we debate. The handmark paper ballot is married to the digital image because the original is going to take a selfie, and you can release the images immediately, and that's why the federal government is wanting to preserve those. And if the image is now placed out online, you can compare it to the original. But with a first generation copy from a computer, every time that computer makes another copy, it's still a first generation copy. Every time a voter marks their ballot, it's a fingerprint, it's a social security number. That's a first generation copy, and any other one is a second generation copy. So I will be submitting this information before the County Election Commission because I do not want that to go unnoticed from this body. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You want to respond to that?
Unless somebody asks me a question.
Oh.
That was data from Shelby County. It was not. The information that I was trying to convey was incredibly misinterpreted in the cesspool that is the internet. That my issue is not voter error. Voters can do, whatever they want with their ballots. My issue is that it has a disproportionate impact on some of our citizens, and I'm advocating for a system that makes every vote count equally.
All right. I guess it's, we'll move to voting.
Commissioner Taylor here.
Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming we're prepared to move to debate. Mr. Chairman, just for the purposes, we have to have an item on the floor for which to debate. So for the purposes of getting the item on the floor, I would move that we adopt the recommendation from the election administrator for ballot marking devices.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Taylor to accept the recommendation for ballot marking devices from our administrator. Do we have a second?
I would like to object to the motion, Mr. Chairman.
What's your objection?
From all of the conversations that we had, respectively, Mr. Taylor, every meeting that we had, we were trying to select a vendor first and then trigger the release of the RFP so that the public can view it. And I just fear that if we just go right along through the entire process, that no matter what we do at the end, the public is going to see everything afterwards. And all of these things that we try to do, it was called the Taylor Plan. So I don't know if it changed, and it's not the Taylor Plan. I think I heard it on Bill Drees that when he articulately laid it out, he was trying to get the mayor to do the intent to award, and then they can release everything in the public domain, and that would be subject to a final vote by the commission to figure what the method would be. So I realize that motion may not win, but I at least need to say it for the record, because unless somebody discussed something other than that, I was always under the impression.
Second. I have a second by Commissioner Yulehorn. All those in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I think now would be the appropriate time for all of us to debate the motion. And I don't know who may have been ahead of me on the list there, but I did wish to speak on the motion at the appropriate time. So.
Well, you made the motion and there's been a second, so.
Okay. All right, well, I'll take that opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to move forward with my comments.
All right.
First, and to address Commissioner Smith's concern, you're correct. I worked very hard to try to get this information released prior to our vote today. Taylor Plan or Smith Plan or Taylor Smith Plan, whatever we want to call it. And there were several times in which I thought I had that worked out. And even the attorneys all were in agreement with moving forward with a recommendation. At first, we talked about this body making a preliminary vote, going to the mayor, him sign the letter of the intent to authorize letter, and then it come back to us for ratification, then go to the county commission for funding. Then that didn't work. The attorneys objected. Then we tried another approach where we'd have the administrator of elections, Ms. Phillips, make the recommendation to the mayor, just like the fire director would to purchase a fire truck, or the sheriff to purchase a patrol car, or the county IT person to purchase computer equipment. And then we thought we had it worked out that way, and then county purchasing objected to that, and I believe the county attorney even weighed in on it. Mr. Ryder could correct me if I'm wrong, but the attorneys within county government objected to that, and they were adamant that the only way we could move forward was the process as it was spelled out in state law, which unfortunately meant that we had to debate and vote without the benefit of the information being released to the public. The county's position was, well, the public will get an opportunity to debate or to comment on the election machines at the county commission level, because before it gets to the county commission for funding, the mayor will have actually signed that letter. And at that point, all the information is released and the public could presumably comment at the county commission. Attorney Ryder and I accurately reflect everything
I think that's an accurate description.
And if I may interject, my interpretation from the deputy administrator to the mayor, and also from the email that she sent, the only thing that changed about that was that the purchasing department came to the knowledge that it was the purchasing process, that the 5 owners of it had no idea what was in it. And they raised issues that we had a flawed purchasing process. And the only way they would be willing to let the mayor sign such a intent to award was if first the commissioners got to see what was in it. And that's what I thought we were doing at 4 p.m. And the rest of everything that you said was still the same. So unless that is different, and I don't know how we got to something different, that's what I thought we were doing today.
Duly noted, for my purposes, I mean, I tried everything in the world. The last information I had came from our attorneys, from the county attorney, indicating that this was the process that they recommended. And I don't like it. In 13 years of public life, I have never cast a vote to spend the public's money that the dollar amount wasn't made public prior to my vote. I don't like it at all, but it's where we are. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move forward with my comments. A couple of things. One thing that has struck me that I don't quite understand, Ms. Phillips, is that all the comments that I've heard from the public regarding paper ballots versus ballot marking devices, they all concentrate on the touch screen, the ballot marking device. Seems to be the technology that everyone is afraid of, that is subject to hacking and mischief by somebody. But everyone seems to be comfortable with the technology, with the scanner that actually counts the votes. And to me, there would be two ways. If you were going to interfere with an election, there would be two ways in which to do that. One is when the voter is casting their ballot, to somehow not cast a ballot that was intended to be cast, vote flipping as we currently hear about. But if I were going to hack, and I'm not a computer person, I would rather hack where the votes are counted. To me, that would be an easier and more efficient way to manipulate the outcome of an election rather than where the votes are actually cast. Can you speak to that?
Well, I actually agree with Commissioner Smith on one thing. The threat to counting the votes or to casting the votes is coming from outside in social media in an attempt to break down confidence. But the machines themselves have heavy levels of security built in them. They have heavy physical security. So I don't, of the two, it would be much more difficult for anybody to get access to the machines and tamper with the counting. But even if you did, assuming, your paper ballots, you do audits, we test, we audit, we trust, but we verify.
But, I mean, am I correct in assuming that if they're both computer driven, both are, if you've got a concern with hacking on the ballot marking device, then you should also have that same concern with the scanner in which the votes are actually scanned.
It's the same scanner for whether the voter marked it by hand or whether it's ballot marking device.
But in all the debate, I've not really heard anyone say, those dastardly scanners, they're not counting votes right. It's always seemed, the comments have always been on the ballot marking, not the ballot counting, which I just find interesting. It's almost like the wrong technology is being focused upon.
That's great.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
Mr. Chairman, this is my time.
Well, I thought he was finished, but he's
not.
not.
Okay.
The one thing I probably should have led with, Mr. Chairman, is there have been two news accounts that I would like to get a brief statement from both people were mentioned in that in the article. One dealing with office space that's leased by Mr. Ryder's law firm, and the others, whether or not Ms. Phillips has any interest in any voting machine companies. And if I could just ask both of them to clear the record on that, to remove any cloud that may exist with that, and if I could perhaps ask Mr. Ryder and Ms. Phillips to address that. And then I'd like to resume my comments.
Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner. And, that's a very important question. I've worked with or for this election commission for several decades, and I take my responsibility under both Republicans and Democrats, I might add. And I take my responsibilities here very, very seriously. And my goal is to provide the best legal advice that I can in an ethical manner. I want to assure this commission and each and every commissioner, I have no association with ES&S or any other, which is our current vendor, or with any of the bidders who responded to the RFP. In fact, I didn't even know the names of the bidders until the briefing that this body received 10 days ago. I have no involvement with the lobbying firm for ES&S as reported in the articles you referenced, Commissioner, other than the fact that my law firm pays them rent. We rent an office in their suite in Nashville for the purpose of conducting depositions and meetings when we have business in Nashville. And that is the limit of my involvement with that firm. So there's never been any discussion with any member of that firm about the purchase process, because I had no knowledge of the purchase process, as I think the commissioners well know. Wasn't involved in drafting the RFP, wasn't involved in the scoring process, have no vote on the ultimate decision here. That's for the commissioners. My role is solely as a lawyer. So what it comes down to is the election commission is a client of my firm. My firm is a tenant of the firm in Nashville. This vendor is a client of that firm. So that's a very tenuous relationship, and frankly, I've looked at it upside down and sideways, and I can't see that presents a conflict of interest. It's strictly a tenant-landlord relationship. So thank you for asking that question, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve this commission and the people of Shelby County. I believe that we're all here committed to the idea of fair and free and honest elections, and I think that is my goal and my commitment to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Ms. Phillips, I asked the same question of you, just so we can dispel any perception of any conflicts that may have the perception of existing.
Okay. I have never worked for an election company ever. I know a lot of people in election company. Elections is a really small world. And I know people at Runback, I know people at the Defenders, I know people at Unison, I know people at, Minneapolis. I know a lot of people in the election world, but I don't take their money, and I never have. There has been some suggestion that one of my adult children works for an election company. Well, they do, but none of the companies that have submitted bids. I'm not sure why my adult financially independent son would have any impact on this. There was also a suggestion that when I was, just before I hired here, I worked for a company called Inc., who ended up being our voter registration vendor. However, I'm in possession of a memorandum from the county attorney's office. I had asked the question, is there any conflict of interest? Is there anything that needs to be disclosed? I got that memo, and basically there was no conflict of interest because at that time I had 2 children working for election companies. I mean, when you grow up and you start proofing ballots when you're 12 years old, and then I draft you as a poll worker when you're 18, it's kind of a family business. So, but they did advise me to disclose that to the scoring committee, that I was a former employee of theirs, and I did do so. I have the email trail. So, I have not committed, I have no conflict of interest here. So.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Phillips. I will tell you, only because I had the benefit of time with Mr. Ryder, I was only made aware of the article regarding Ms. Phillips last night. But with Mr. Ryder, I actually reached out to the attorney who was the ethics officer when I was on the city council, went through what the article said, and they agreed with Mr. Ryder's position, that is, that there was no conflict. It was so de minimis, I believe was the term he used, that there was no conflict there. So I appreciate both of you addressing that on the front end. Mr. Chairman, I still have other comments, but I also don't want to monopolize it. If you want to go to some other commissioners, and if I can back on the rotation, so I could let
I believe the Commissioner Smith had a question.
Let me go to the actual zone. So the company that he works for, they have no relationship with the three editors.
None whatsoever. They were sold to another company, and then part of the business was split up in a third company, but there's no interest from the original company that were associated with any of the three bettors.
Commissioner Smith?
So I'm going to try to take these in order. Commissioner Taylor, I have refrained from saying any of this to you since I've been on the commission. So I'm going to take the time to address you now. There are
address me now or address me now.
there are considerable attacks on the tabulation part of the election process. So for clarification for the commission body, the problem with the ballot marking device extends far past them being vulnerable. And I attended the forum and I really never heard it described so well, although I will disclose that I work with the gentleman that I'm about to read my notes that I took from. But he said hand-marked paper ballot systems have shorter lines. This surprises people. The reason that many voters can fill ballots out by hand in the same time is because of simple privacy rules. And slow voters do not hold up the line. With VMPBs, voting is limited by the number of machines. With a hand-marked paper ballot, you can have a fast voter next to a slow voter, next to a fast voter, next to an even slower voter. And it's very easy and inexpensive to set up additional privacy rules as needed. A hand-marked paper ballot system is intuitive. Everyone understands how to mark a paper ballot. It's also better for voters who have challenges with literacy and language and memory. Those voters can take their time and not feel like they're holding up the line. A hand-marked paper ballot system is more universally accessible. Universal accessibility means allowing voters to vote privately and independently by choosing the method that is most accessible to them. Not everybody's going to want a ballot marking device because they have a handicap accessibility. It's more accessible to voters with who are less comfortable with technology, also who have screen sensitivities. Some people don't like bright light. It's more private and it's accessible for voters with wheelchairs. And it's better for voters with physical limitations when the line is short. So if you have a long line and an older voter, yes, you let them go to the front of the line, but what if you're a young voter with a leg problem? So these are the reasons why the hand-marked paper ballot is being addressed for that. The security aspect of it is secondary to this. There are many disability groups that disapprove of hand-marked paper ballots. And the favorite is some, when we get into the actual discussion, I'll say what that one is. I don't think it's approved here. But the threat level is what I was describing in my remarks. If you hack the scanner, the original record the intent was enshrined by the piece of paper. When you make that copy and you release the image, if you hack the image, you still have the original. And when you do paper audits, you can audit the images and then grab the originals. Professor Philip Stark came up with the method that everybody is passing around in Congress, called as limited audits, where he has come up with a statistical method to minimize that risk. So there are real risks as associated with the precinct scanner, but not the focus as you would see it on, I've been in the rabbit hole for a long time, obviously, but from outside of being inside the rabbit hole, there is a considerable amount of nuance with those people, but I hope that clears it up for you, son. Dr. Philip Stark, he's the professor of mathematics and statistics for Berkeley University.
Has that very
It's in Congress, yeah, it's in Congress. Yeah, he has statistics.
I understand what
Yeah, they have all of it.
so he tested that specific
good enough. Yeah. Just Google. The next question I have, Mr. Ryder, because he addressed you, and I heard like the most best comments about you and the worst comments about you. And I think I've said it over the years, that you are a smooth guy. And I even called you on a personal call, and I said, look, I heard some bad stuff about you, but I don't see it. I do have a question with this part of it, because it does not look good when you see it like that. Although your explanation does make sense. And Commissioner Taylor so aptly points out that that can exist without being a conflict. So my question to you is, should have been disclosed? Because I think it's the looking like there's impropriety that has more ring to it than there actually being impropriety.
Commissioner Smith, again, thank you for the question, because these things need to be explored and they need to be discussed. As we previously discussed, I don't receive any money from any of these people. I pay them money. And they're the landlord. So, I'm trying to figure out what I would have disclosed and when I would have disclosed it. As I mentioned, I'm out of the loop on the purchasing process. That's not my role as your attorney, and no role in the RFPs, no role in the evaluation and scoring. And as I mentioned, I didn't know who the bidders were until the commission got briefed on that subject. So, and I'm not fully aware of the array of clients that our landlord has in Nashville. So I'm not sure when I would have known what to disclose. When this started to become an issue, I think I sent every commissioner an email explaining our situation and what that we were a tenant of this firm in Nashville. So I've tried to be as transparent as I could about this with the commission. But I'm a tenant, and I don't have any involvement in any process, so I wasn't aware that there was something that needed to be disclosed until we got into this process a couple of weeks ago. And at that point, I did make the disclosure.
Okay, I think the thing that routed me was that it's our current vendor, and they are registered lobbyists for the state of Tennessee on behalf of the SNS. But I accept your payment. And for Ms. Phillips, I read the article. Knowing wasn't the thing that they said. They said you work for everyone counts. And I was asked this question, and I had no idea what this was. I think that article was published yesterday, like 7 or 8 o'clock. But what they said was you basically steered $1 million contract to your son, and that it was also your former employer, that this voter registration that I've been very critical of, so this is obviously the right name for me. And I'm not saying that this is even true, but this is what I want to give you the opportunity to respond to specifically. The article said that you worked for Everyone Counts, and when you left Everyone Counts, you pursued a purchasing agreement to get our current voter registration system that we have now, and I'm on the record as being very critical of it. Not that gives it any weight, but that $1 million contract was given to a company that went out of business right after receiving $1 million cash infusion, and it was wondered. What they were wondering was, did you even look at EBITDA to know that they were in financial distress when it was being selected? And if the commissioners were aware of the edict, and I wasn't on the commission, so I don't have the commission take it down, but I don't know if they were saying, did the commissioners know that you had a bid going to your former employer, A, and also where your son is currently employed, B? That's what I read.
We'll publish this memorandum. Yes, it was properly disclosed to everyone involved. And we did do our financial due diligence. There were 5 bidders, and that was not a decision I made unilaterally. There were 5 people on the scoring team. Again, IT security, election administrators, chief deputy. And this was the highest scoring proposal. So, it does not mean that made this decision unilaterally. So
yes, you work for Everyone Counts?
I worked for Everyone
Okay,
Counts.
okay.
I left them to come here. And then 10 months later, we put out an RFP. I properly, I asked the county ethics officer, what do I need to do here? I don't have any financial ties to them. One of my sons works in another division, and then another son at that time was, again, I think he was working overnight help desk because they were did global private elections. I disclosed that as required, as they suggested. They said right here, which I'll be happy to pass you out copies of, that there was no conflict of interest. Again, I didn't make the decision in a vacuum. There were other people who participated in it. And I do remember at one point, Commissioner Tate asked me if that was the company that I used to work for. And I said, yes. So
What's the date of the letter?
this is February 22nd, 2017.
Mr. Wyden?
I have to clarify something that I said earlier, and I hate to jump around, Mr. Chairman, but Commissioner Taylor asked at the beginning about the process that we're using. And I described how we received that process from county government. And I want to make clear that the procedure that we were given originated with contracts administration, and the only involvement that the mayor's office had was to transmit what they had received for contracts administration. And I didn't want to suggest that the mayor was weighing in on this process.
Or the county attorney.
Or the county attorney.
Okay. Mr. Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been relatively silent on something that I think it is highly significant, and I may not have another opportunity to speak on this matter. But the chairman and I were a 2-man team that did the presentation for both the voter registration system as well as the voting machines. I've served as your deputy under Democratic and Republican administrations. I served as the acting administrator for the Election Commission. I currently serve on the IT Steering Committee as well as the Security Subcommittee for the county. And I want to make sure that I do a balance on the narrative regarding voter security, election security. The biggest threat to our democracy is not at the voting machine itself, but those things that lead up to it. One of the most recent things that the Election Commission kindly paid for was for me to attend the digital democracy, the DP3, which is a digital democracy forum that was put together by Harvard College, the Belfort Institute, that I attended the latter part of last year. That was conducted by people who are formerly part of our national intelligence, law enforcement, and the military. And their subject matters that were covered were relative to where the greatest risks were. So let me start by saying any computer can be hacked, so that we're clear on that. But here at the Election Commission, and the opportunity to gain access to a voting machine, let alone a series of voting machines. Each of your respective political party has a voting machine tech. There's a Republican and there's a Democrat. We have considerable investment in surveillance here, and I have access to a number of things, but not one subject during the briefing that I got, and I've also received briefings and participated in briefings even with the former Secretary of Homeland Security. The primary threat exists outside of voting machines, and we are not aware of a situation where an election outcome was changed because of voting machine tampering. What keeps me awake at night are things such as a tainted email that allows whether it's a foreign nation actor, and we speak frequently about Russia, Iran, North Korea. Their threats come through cyberspace and elsewhere, using social media to influence people, or even terrorists and domestic actors. They attempt to get within our voter registration databases and to affect the outcomes of the voter databases. And I will agree that on the outside would be the tabulation process, but the larger threats loom outside of voting machines themselves. And there's always a risk. There's a risk if you get in your car. So that is a risk. So I'm going to accept that. That if there is a potential vulnerability, then that is a risk. But part of my job is doing risk and threat. What was a threat to our organization? You would get more damage from someone defacing a website, saying that we had changed the voting hours, or using Commissioner Smith's analogy of a corrupted database where it shows that someone has voted and they haven't voted, or that they are not registered to vote, or any of the various things that go on social media platforms that tend to affect voters. And even currently, the COVID-19, the opportunities that it presents to satisfy hungry voters and people on the internet for information that is actually sent to employees of county government, the election commission, in order to get beyond our firewalls or whatever, in order to gain access to our systems and our databases. So I take these things very seriously. I've been at the very front of it, as Chairman Stampson knows. I am one of three people. I'm only one of three people in the state of Tennessee that has ever administered an election in Shelby County. Without stating a preference for vendors, my own perspective is that a machine marked ballot would work better for Shelby County, but I would work as enthusiastically or as hard on whatever decision that you make. But I think it is a disservice to the community if we don't provide a balanced narrative of what the threats are and from where they come. I get threatened, the young lady over here who assists me, we do regular updates when we become aware of updates that are required for browsers. I get numerous emails every day about different threat assessments and risk assessments that are done by either Homeland Security and other agencies directly and indirectly. But the emphasis is not on the voting machine or that device. I'll agree outside of that, or the processes that we use, if they're flawed or what have you. Yes, and there should always, and you've heard me say this before, I think it's inherently important that people challenge us on how well we go about protecting the foundation of our democracy. But our democracy is under threat. And it is primarily not to elect any particular person, but to undermine our confidence in the process, to get Republicans and Democrats against each other, whites and blacks against each other, just on it, young people and old people, to the point that we become so fragmented that the outcome of an election has been impacted by a foreign entity or person. And then let me also say this, there are scientists who are paid by criminals to develop programs, ransomware, malware, in order to get into your voting system and databases in order to hold them hostage. So if we don't, without debating, or if we don't include what our intelligence people tell us, where the threats are coming from, where people who actually conduct elections in that perspective and don't have the situational awareness tools that we need during election time, then I think that we've done the public and the voters a disservice by not giving them a complete set of information. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
I think I still need to put kind of raise that. There are entire industries devoted to the threats. It's called the voting village. The irony of this particular subject is Shelby County made the first page of the voting village in 2017. It was a scientist from Lawrence Livermore Laboratories that contacted me, along with Matt Blades, who is one of the foremost people in cryptology and election and hardware, and also Harry Hershey, who was the feature of a HBO documentary that just released called Kill Chain, devoted to this subject. However, this breach that happened was where one of our poll books was sold somewhere, and all of the information was leaked out, and they found it on the first day. And you guys can Google it, because I was so unaware of this. And when Commissioner Taylor, you were on the commission, so I would wonder if you heard about this. It was so the gentleman who found it, the TDI opened an investigation, and I got the TDI number, and they flew to Philadelphia to get the information. And it had driver's license numbers on it and sensitive information about all of us. So I don't know if Shelby County is in a position to talk about anything using 20-year-old technology, but that was a real instance where information about Shelby County was leaked out, and I was attending for it. But the administrator has been questioned about this, and she has responded on a letterhead that has our names on it. And I can picture out to see, you probably don't know that that happened. But full disclosure, the HBO documentary, yours truly is in the thank you section. So I'm closely aligned with a lot of people in this industry. So they are not saying this in a vacuum. This is a general consensus among people who study this type of stuff for a living. And they're not just saying it to divide people, because most of the people who listen to what I have to say are Republican. So but I just, the way you respond to this threat is with transparency. And that's what everybody's going after. The reason why they're going for the paper is because the paper can be authenticated again. When you do something in a piece of machinery, all computers can be hacked, then I can erase my path of entry. I can erase my trail. I can erase everything that I want, and you don't have anything to refer to. But paper is drastically different.
Mr. Tate?
Go on. Mr. Chairman, if I'm correct, and if it's a different reference, please let me know. But once again, I'm going to repeat that what happens as far as the integrity issue, the security issue, being outside of the actual voting process, he's making the point very well. If you're referring to the electronic poll book that was purchased online by someone, that device was one where in the electronic poll book, there is a memory card. And the vendor with whom we were working had control of that device and did not take the memory card out of it that we were using for the purposes of testing. So that is a part of the digital hygiene of that company. And it was not one of the devices that either belonged to us or was under our control once he left here. But I must also state that our IT division has also worked harder to make sure that there are data security agreements that you have to have in order to, to be a vendor, that you have to return data after it is used or protect that data and what have you. But once again, that was something that happened outside of the control of the Election Commission. It was not one of our devices here that was taken and sold on eBay. The CF card that is in the device should have been washed or taken out or destroyed after we finished doing testing with that vendor. So once again, I've been here for a little while, and part of one of those phone calls that I get late at night was about this matter. So if this is the one that is being referenced by the commissioner, I want to make sure you understand it was not an electronic poll book that belonged to the Election Commission. It was not a device under our control, and had the CF card that is in the device been taken out by the vendor and destroyed or erased, it wouldn't have been there. So, excuse me, thank you, Chairman, for giving me the opportunity.
Sure, I think you make my point for me. We're not going to be able to catch everything. That's what hackers do. They wait for a simple opening. One thing about the devices we're about to purchase, they run Windows 7 software. Microsoft doesn't support that anymore. And everything we're about to buy now is not supported by the company that issues all the patches and the security patches. So it's going to be breeding ground. I got a little Pac-Man on it. So we get it. So I don't want to belabor the point. I just wanted to put that transparency that's why you see people say election integrity and transparency. That's the whole behind the matter. And I wear it as a brand. And that's why I advocate for the transparency in the process. So the way you engage it is open it up. Everything that's happening with COVID cases, they say test, show more, show numbers, tell us what's happening. They're advocating for transparency so we can know what's happening. It's the same way.
Okay, Commissioner. Thank you.
So I want to ask you, were you aware that the TBI conducted an investigation based upon what you described regarding that machine?
I'm aware
Perhaps I could answer that more efficiently because I was involved in the investigation. There was no disclosure of information on that device that was not available in the all voters detail list. We don't collect driver's license numbers, so we obviously couldn't have them.
So how do we check?
And the device had headers for a driver's license because some states do collect driver's licenses, and those were sold in multiple states. It had a header for a social security number, but they were not on the device. I was involved in the TBI investigation, and they concluded that they never knew where it came from, but there was no disclosure of personal information about Shelby County residents.
Okay, so then that machine was not hacked.
Oh. All right, Commissioner Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The companies we looked at all the companies bid on a ballot marking device and a voter marked paper ballot, correct?
That's correct.
And the company that you're recommending, their capital outlay on a ballot marking device was greater than the capital outlay on a voter marked paper ballot, correct?
That's also correct.
And the equipment we're purchasing, we would anticipate a lifespan of 10 years,
At least 10 years, probably a little longer.
at least 10 years. So, but the operational cost associated with voter marked paper ballots is greater than, you mentioned in your presentation, is greater than the operational costs associated with ballot marking device, correct?
That's also correct.
And could you just speak generally to what, and I know you did in the presentation, just humor me a little bit. If you could tell me why the operational costs are greater, and do you have an estimate of how much greater the operational cost would be over that 10 to 14-year lifespan?
I'm going to order, Mr. Chairman. Are we in the discussion phase now? I know we have two motions on the floor.
Just one motion.
I got a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay, so did they overrule my motion to just select the vendor?
It was not made.
Okay.
You just objected to my motion.
So it's on the floor now for discussion? I'm just trying to keep it.
Right, my motion to, I
No, you got
put a
it.
motion on the floor for the purposes of
We've
discussion.
been on discussion for the last 45 minutes.
Well, we talked about Attorney Brown and Ms. Phillips, and we talked about some things. I'm just trying to follow.
And I probably agree with that. I want to give them an
I'm
on track.
He's there. Mr. Chairman.
We're on the motion and second.
You said
Okay, he made a motion, you made the second. Then he objected to it, so then we got into all this other conversation. Now we're getting back where we should have been.
I was making sure we was.
So you got the floor, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips.
Yes, voter marked paper ballots require more labor, both at election day and at early voting. So those costs, operational costs go up. You have the cost of printing ballots for election day because ballot on demand is not going to be satisfactory for Shelby County. So you have the cost of printing ballots. Because of the standards set by the coordinator's office, many of those ballots are really not necessary, but you have to print them anyway because you can never ever run out of ballots. Voter marked paper ballots take some different supplies. You have lanyards, you have to have batteries, and pens. And pens are considerably more expensive than the disposable styluses we would use on ballot marking devices. So yeah, over 14 years of cost difference is about, voter marked paper ballots cost about 9.1 million more. For 10 years, it's about 6.5. So somewhere between 6.5 and 9.1 million.
So on the surface, initially, ballot marking devices are more expensive because you got the capital outlay. But that equipment lasts 10 to 14 years, whereas the expense associated in your estimation with hand marked paper ballots is more operational than capital.
Right, yeah, it is definitely coming out of the operations budget.
Now, you kind of glossed over something I think is important, and that is, why is it that, in your estimation, ballot on demand wouldn't work in Shelby County?
Well, I know my poll workers, we couldn't do it without them, but I do not believe that our current poll workers could successfully implement ballot on demand. St. Louis County tried it recently, and they had many polling places that didn't open until 10:30 when their poll opening time is 6. We do not have, I couldn't hire enough technicians to make that work on election day. So it just, most places that do voter marked paper ballots do have them pre-printed.
And so moving for a moment to the votes and how they're counted. So a voter would go to the ballot marking device, and it would be a very similar experience to what the voter currently has. Touch screen, the computer sends them through all the screens to ensure they have an opportunity to vote in every race. They hit vote or cast ballot or some variation thereof.
Right.
And it prints off a paper ballot with their choices on there, is that
That's correct.
And is it their choice, only their choices, or is it print the ballot and have a dot or an X by the?
No, just printing off their choices.
Just their choice. So then the voter then takes it in a privacy sleeve.
Well, a voter marked paper, a ballot marking device ballot, you just turn upside down,
Turn upside
nobody see it, so you don't need sleeves.
So the ballot sleeve would be from the hand marked paper ballot,
Right.
because the poll worker has to do some statement.
Yeah.
All right, so the ballot that's printed by the ballot marking device has their selections on it, and it's scanned into a tabulator.
Right, it's got a precinct level scanner.
And assuming there are no errors on there over
Well,
those,
there's never gonna be any errors on the ballot marking device ballot.
I stand correct. So then that ballot goes into the ballot box, correct?
Right.
So the scanner is actually tabulating the votes as it gets scanned in. Is that
It's
correct?
doing two things, it's making an image and it's tabulating the votes.
So in an election challenge, currently, using our machines now, it makes it very difficult to do a recount because you just push the same button you pushed on election night and gives you the same result you got on election night. Would that be?
Yeah, the only place you really have any recount questions is in paper absentees.
Okay. So currently, we really don't have a way to do a quote unquote recount using our current machines.
That's right.
The only recount will be in the absentee paper ballot.
Right.
Okay. So with the new machines that you're recommending, if there were a contested election, there are multiple ways we could recount the votes. You could obviously go to the tabulator again, and it would give you presumably the same results that gave you an election. I guess that would be one way. Yet another way would be you chose to or needed to, you could actually hand count the voter preferences on those paper ballots. Would that?
That's correct.
So, now I've also heard about a barcode, and I hate to bring that up for fear of going down that rabbit hole, but is there a barcode on these ballots of the machines?
Yes, there is a barcode on them, but the thing I don't think most people understand about voter marked paper ballots is that when you're scanned and tabulated, you're not reading the name of the candidate, you are reading the position of the timing marks, which essentially is a form of a barcode. So, it's printed in plain English as to who you selected and the office that you voted for. So you re-audit and you tabulate from that human readable information.
Right, but I think the challenge or the fear is that you can't read a barcode. So therefore, you don't really know that the names that are printed on the paper match what is actually in the barcode that gets counted.
Well, that would be detected pretty quickly in an audit.
Well, and you're getting ahead of that. So with the barcode, it could be presumably a third way you could count the ballots. You could reread the barcode, you could go to the scanner first and print out the same result you got on election night. You could read the barcode, or you could hand count the names that are printed on the ballot. And presumably, if you did all three of those and they all matched, then you got good results for that.
Yeah, and there are some jurisdictions, and I'm not clear on whether this is permitted under Tennessee law, but some jurisdictions take the ballot images from an election and slap them up on the internet and let people with lots of time on their hands go through them.
And with hand-marked paper ballot, the advantage, according to the paper ballot proponents, is that they're verifying and marking their ballot at the same time. Granted that they're doing that, they're marking it, but there are challenges there as well. I mean, to me, that's where a voter could wind up casting two votes in the same election, and the scanner would, I guess, pick that up and kick it out, and the voter would either fix their ballot before it's cast. Is that how that would work?
Well, what typically happens is you generally do not program scanners to kick out ballots with undervotes, because approximately estimates vary, but between 30 and 40% of all ballots have undervotes. These are people that either skipped a race or they intentionally didn't like any of the candidates and didn't vote for anyone. So virtually no jurisdiction in the United States kicks ballots back for undervotes because it just gums up the works. People who've tried it have gone back to just kicking out ballots for overvotes. Now, what happens in real life, yes, the scanner's telling you you have an overvote, your rate, your choice isn't going to count here. 99% of the time, the voter doesn't want to take the additional time to revote, or they're too embarrassed by their mistake, and they just say override or push it on through. So that's why very few people believe, people who do paper ballots don't think that there are that many voter errors. You really don't know that until you look far.
One other question, go back to calls. With the big counties in Tennessee that have gone from touchscreen ballot marking devices to paper ballots, are you aware of any?
There is one, but they haven't actually implemented yet. And August will be their first election.
So we don't have a track record there to know if in fact they actually had a savings of going from touchscreen ballot marking devices to paper ballots.
No, there's no real history on it. Now, I can tell you, no, I'm sorry, I didn't fully understand your question. Wilson County moved to ballot marking devices, but I don't know what their previous system was. I'm sorry, I guess I can't really be responsive to that.
That's right. If you could explain just for the record, the process going forward. So presumably this body will make will vote to approve your recommendation, at which point it gets transmitted to county purchasing. The mayor then will sign the letter of intent to award, and then the contract then goes to the county commission for approval and funding.
Right.
Correct. And the county commission had previously allocated funding, so the funding is allocated. It would be appropriated once the county commission votes on this contract and appropriates money to purchase the equipment.
That's right.
And the county commission recently adopted a resolution advocating paper ballots, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, if I could, is just walk through some of the points that are in the resolution, if I could get Ms. Phillips to comment on those, but I really don't think we're as far apart from the county commission as perhaps one might think initially. One other question before I get into that, Ms. Phillips. The ballot marking devices, if we were to implement those and a voter walked in and wanted to vote on a paper ballot, there is a possibility that voters could either vote on a ballot marking device or a paper ballot, and the scanner would scan and count. In other words, the scanner will count hand-marked paper ballots and voter mark. The scanner will scan and count hand-marked paper ballots and ballot mark devices, just one right after the other. You don't have to segregate them.
There's no difference between the two. The scanner is programmed to accept either.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, looking at the resolution, the first 6 whereases deal with COVID-19. And before I ask Ms. Phillips to comment on that and how it relates specifically to voting and what has to be sanitized between each vote and so forth, I told the advocates of hand-marked paper ballots that of all the arguments for hand-marked paper ballots, I think this is the weakest. Now, obviously, COVID-19 is on the forefront of everyone's mind because everyone in here just about is wearing a face mask. The economy has been decimated. No one is working in 6 to 8 weeks. So COVID-19, I'm not diminishing it at all. It is a very real thing. It has killed people and causes people to become very sick. So I'm not diminishing that at all. But I'm also old enough that we have been through other epidemics, pandemics, that we didn't fundamentally alter the way we conduct elections. I'm old enough to remember HIV/AIDS. In the late 80s, no one knew how you got AIDS. Everyone was afraid to share utensils, afraid to drink after somebody, afraid to touch somebody. I remember being in the funeral business, the panic that went throughout our industry because people were dying with AIDS and you didn't know how you got it. People were terrified, but we didn't change the way we voted. And there were elections and we used those shoot-tronic machines and different voting methods. We didn't change what we did with HIV/AIDS. SARS, N1H1, bird flu, swine flu, all these others have come, these epidemics have come and gone. We develop vaccines. We do a better job of determining how people catch these and alleviate fear. So I don't think personally that we should make a long-term capital project outlay based on a short-term panic over COVID-19. I'm not diminishing COVID-19. I just think that's important to put it in a historical context. But practically speaking, if you could address why someone should be concerned about COVID-19 as it relates to ballot marking devices versus paper ballots.
Well, we're working currently with the health department and to determine the best way to conduct elections in this. We will be buying knee shields for our workers for early voting. The Tennessee Department of Homeland Security is providing masks and gloves for our workers. I don't know what other further changes we'll see, but this is a landscape that's changing minute by minute. When the legislature comes back next month, if they come back, it could change further. But I will say that Wisconsin conducted an in-person election in April, I believe it was the 5th. 475,000 people voted in person that day. And the reports that I'm reading is that less than 50 cases of COVID-19 could be attached to that. So I do believe that it is possible if we take the proper precautions to do elections safely.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Another whereas in the resolution, actually two of them together, repeated incidents in Shelby County elections over the last few decades has highlighted the need to ensure accuracy of election tabulation procedures and have degraded public confidence in election integrity and reliability of elections held within Shelby County. Whereas most election security experts agree that voter marked paper ballot system in which every individual voter personally and physically marks the paper ballot is less vulnerable to hacking, computer error than ballot marking device, which assigns a crucial task to a computer. I think I've heard you and both Mr. Young say that both have vulnerabilities. Ballot marking devices are a computer, can be hacked, but there are also vulnerabilities with chain voting and others that I heard you describe earlier with paper ballots. But the largest threat to voter confidence, election confidence, really goes to what Mr. Young was speaking of earlier, which is influencing our process and systems using other methods and computers than voting. I thought it was interesting because you said they could, one threat might be to hack into the computer rolls and I go show up to vote and either I've already voted or it shows that I've already voted to prevent me from casting a vote based on my voter history, how I might vote, or I don't show up on the rolls at all, which means I'm casting a provisional ballot at best. So those are the larger threats than ballot marking devices or hand-marked paper ballots. And since both have vulnerabilities, I would say it's probably almost a wash. How would you characterize it that way, or would you say one is definitely more vulnerable than the other?
No, you have to have physical security over both. There is risk, but the profile just changes. I mean, I'm deeply concerned given some of the things that we've seen in Tennessee and perhaps across the nation. I think it's vastly more likely that a helpful poll worker would assist a voter by pre-filling in some ovals on a paper ballot than it is that someone would hack into our system. But again, that's why we have protocols and security in place. And There's cameras and swipe keys and our voter registration system, this thing you've seen me wear. You have to have that to get into it. So, we have waitlisted only certain users, and so we're being as careful and as cautious as we possibly can.
And in the scoring, I'm assuming ballot security and ballot processing, all that was a scoring. The scoring, it was something that weighed heavily on the minds of those who were scoring these contests.
Yes, security was a very huge part of this, and that's why we had people who are expert in that area be part of the scoring team.
And the scoring team was made up of both Democrats and Republicans.
Yes. It was
Equal numbers.
There were 7, so, and honestly, I don't know the party affiliation of the 6th one, 7th one.
By definition, it was not equal, but it was
It was-
7, so it's probably 4-3.
I don't know, but I don't know which way.
But it was Democrats and Republicans.
Yes, it was a bipartisan team.
Another whereas, the Shelby County Election Commission has affirmatively stated that the only duty of the Election Commission, administrative elections, to recommend and approve voting equipment should be purchased per Tennessee Code annotated section 212-116. I'm assuming we're purchasing, not knowing exactly what that code states, I'm assuming we're purchasing the equipment pursuant to state law and from vendors who have been certified by state of Tennessee coordinated elections.
Yes, and I think that one of our attorneys would be more able to comment on that.
All right, if I could ask one of the attorneys.
Go ahead and repeat your question.
All right, I'd like to speak to this particular whereas in the county commission's resolution. The Shelby County Election Commission has affirmatively stated the only duty of the election commission in the administrative elections is to recommend and approve the voting equipment that should be purchased per Tennessee Code annotated section 212-116. However, the purchase of any and all voting equipment is done by the Shelby County Commission as a governing body. A court case was cited, Shelby Advocates for Valid Elections et al. Versus Trey Hargett et al. What was the outcome of that particular court case?
Well, that case was dismissed.
And as previously stated, the process here is we vote to select a vendor. It goes to the county mayor for the signature of the letter. The county commission then votes to appropriate the funding and approve the contract to purchase the equipment. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Wait a minute, I got a question. All right, we are gonna vote on the vendor and the type of machine, or just the vendor?
Well, my motion was to recommend, to approve the recommendation of the county the administrator.
Okay.
So that lawsuit was dismissed. Okay. An additional whereas is the Shelby County Commission passed resolution number 24 entitled Resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Shelby County urging the Shelby County Election Commission to pursue a voter marked paper ballot approach from spending county funds for new voting equipment. We've actually almost accomplished that in 2 ways. One, we actually got bids for strictly a hand-marked paper ballot system, but then we also included in the bid of the ballot marking devices the possibility that a hand-marked paper ballot could be generated and counted in the same scanner along with ballot marked ballots, correct?
That's right, because even if you have voter marked paper ballots for the majority of your voters, you still have to have ballot marking devices for voters with disabilities.
Correct. Okay. So we complied with that section of the whereas.
I think so.
So the next one, Mr. Chairman, is whereas a sign of its ongoing commitment to improve the voting process in Shelby County, the Shelby County Commission passed Resolution 33A, adopted on February 24th, and reallocated capital improvement funds so that new voting machines could be purchased in 2020 without a referendum in time for the presidential election. If we were to approve the motion this evening, would we, let me back up. If I understand correctly, you do not want to roll this out in a presidential election because the presidential election is so large and trying to introduce a new voting system to not only the voters, but also the election workers in such a huge election would not be something we would want to do. Is that correct?
I would be very reluctant to do it. Unfortunately, in Shelby County, many of our voters only vote every 4 years, and so they are not familiar with the process. They take more hand-holding. Trying to introduce a major change in election equipment in a presidential election without having at least some kind of trial beforehand, either August or, maybe we could do a mock election, but, we're not gonna roll it out on November the 6th, I can say that.
But the ideal thing would be to roll it out in the August election, which would be a smaller election, and everyone gets accustomed to the experience, and the workers get accustomed to how to conduct the election.
That would be my preference, yes.
And if we approve this evening, and everything went without a hitch, would we be able to get the equipment purchased and implemented in time for the August election?
I think so, but the key words that you said there were without a hitch.
I put them in there for a reason.
So,
But assuming everything went without a hitch, we could get these machines purchased and in place in time for the August election.
yeah, and I think the thing that would be most critical is we'd have the absentee processing equipment, which is, if we don't have that in August and we get much of an increase in absentee ballots, we're dead.
Well, and with COVID fears, that could potentially happen. So the next whereas, the decision to have a paper record of all ballots and a decision made to protect the integrity of elections by ensuring accurate vote tallies is a step towards restoring voter confidence in the election results, because voters are less likely to vote when they don't trust the voting machines, and that defeats the purpose of spending taxpayer dollars to purchase a new system. With the new equipment, we're actually generating a paper ballot.
There is a paper record of the votes.
And so the only difference is, between the two is, one is marked, hand-marked paper ballot, marked pen and paper, big chief tablet, and number 2 pencil kind of thing.
Pen only, you can't have ballots in Tennessee with pencil.
It's in the lottery.
And then, the other is the ballot marking device that essentially marks the ballot that generates a paper record.
That's correct.
So we're complying with that one. So be it further resolved, the Shelby County officials have a responsibility to use taxpayer dollars efficiently, and the Shelby County Commission views that a voter marked paper ballot system as a reasonable and necessary expense of Shelby County taxpayer funds, and hereby adopts a voter marked paper ballot system and not a PMB system when spending taxpayer dollars. So based on what you were saying earlier, there's actually a cost savings associated with the ballot marking devices over hand-marked paper ballots. Is that correct?
That's correct. You spend more upfront, but less over time.
And, I mean, that clearly is counterintuitive. You just, just thinking about it, you think paper is cheaper than a computer, but when you factor in operational expenses and the like, the paper cost over 10 or 14 years overtakes that of the ballot marking devices, correct?
That's correct.
Of course, we have no way of knowing what the county commission, what information they had when putting this in there, but I do believe, based on what you're saying, is that the most efficient use of taxpayer funds would be to use the ballot marking devices when you factor in a 10 or 14-year lifespan on the equipment.
That's true, because you're going to be using less taxpayer resources over the life of the equipment.
Okay. So the only thing, Mr. Chairman, I think, in an effort to move a little more closely to the county commission adopted this. I question if they had all the information that we have today when they adopted this resolution. But I do think it's important that we at least move in their direction some. And I think maybe a way to do that would be if we approve this motion, then to have an opportunity for a voter to opt out and choose a paper ballot if they are so distrustful of the ballot marking device, and let them get a paper ballot. Very much like when you go through TSA, you can go through the machine, the x-ray machine, or you can opt out and they'll give you a pat down. I think if we were to approve the motion and give the voters an opportunity to opt out of the ballot marking device and use a paper ballot, that would at least be in keeping with the spirit of what the county commission asked us to do, while at the same time, with full knowledge of all the information, knowing that we're actually gonna have a savings to the county over a 10 or 14-year life cycle. So I think that will be a good, I got a quick compromise. And my question to Ms. Phillips is, could that be a possibility that the voters could opt out and choose a paper ballot and vote that way if they so chose? Was that gonna be your question, Mr. Chairman?
My question was, are we gonna have to print ballots at every?
Well, I think, according to Ms. Phillips, we have to do that anyway.
We already have emergency paper ballots at each location for both early and election day. Might take a little bit of poll worker training. I don't think it would increase cost dramatically. We might have to print a few more paper ballots, but nowhere like the 55%. It might take us a couple of elections to figure out how many people liked paper ballots and how many people like ballot marking devices, but yeah, I think that would work.
With the vendor you're recommending, that is a possibility.
Yes, it's a possibility.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the indulgence of the commission, but I think it was important to go through the county commission's resolution, because I really don't think we're as far apart as the resolution may look on the surface. So I appreciate the indulgence of the commission, and you, Mr. Chairman, should let me go through those whereases and therefores. Thank
All right, I
you.
had a couple of hands up over here, so let me get there. I'm gonna get you first.
Okay, in your discussion that came up regarding the ballot marking devices, and you said that there's never an error. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, ballot marking devices prevent voters from overvoting, and all of the marks are machine readable, because sometimes when voters mark ballots, they make like little marks. Sometimes they make little notes in the write-in line. Sometimes they draw pictures on them. So ballot marking devices prevent all of that. So, the voter can still skip a race, of course, because that's their right. But if you can be sure that they saw them, and as we looked at the recount in the Germantown election, there were a very large number of those paper absentee ballots that had no marks on the back, which suggests to me that that voter did not put that ballot over. So that prevents that kind of thing.
Commissioner Smith?
I just want to read an article, this fresh article. We really need to get our money back. Gail Prenegger of Bethlehem Township said, this was from Northampton County when the vendor they purchased. They voted all night, and all of the ballot marking devices showed totals of 0. That would be one error. And the second, there are many more instances like that. But I do have some questions for you. I got a lot of questions, but I'm going to try to keep them small. Will a ballot marking device tell me that I didn't see 12, I didn't see 2 of 14 candidates?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that question.
If I had 16 candidates, if I had 14 candidates to choose from, and the ballot marking device was incorrectly programmed, and it only showed me 12, would I know that?
Well, if the candidate you wanted wasn't available, yes, you'd know it. We just still,
I didn't even know what my choices were?
well, we put printed, sample ballots on the
Well,
walls.
I cut it though. Because you saying it's up to the voter to know what their choices are? I'm not being prepared to say that.
But most of them, you do, we like informed voters, but okay. It does force you to look at all the candidates.
Why would it not tell me that?
Well, if it forces you to look at all the candidates, why?
Why would it not tell me that I was missing 2 candidates?
Well, you wouldn't be missing 2.
If there was a ballot error programming, the error was in ballot programming. I said in my statement earlier that the errors were based on the way the ballots were programmed. There's a full study that I'm submitting into the record. The times that happened, I'm giving an instance of one of those times. Let's make it smaller. There are 3 candidates that I get to choose from. And I think that I might be in the wrong district or something. And I did not see the 3 options that I had. Why will the ballot marking device not show me? How can it tell me that I did it with my own eyes, see three, but not choose the person, versus only saw two.
Well, that would have been caught in our pre-election testing, so. We have a very rigorous testing program.
But this has happened in Shelby County.
Well, yeah, not under my watch.
See, that's the problem again, like, I don't want to be on the person, but nonetheless, let's, for the record, you do not have an answer for that. The reason why you don't have an answer for it is because the ballot marking device is only going to print a summary of what you chose. It's not going to show what your choices were. And the real issue with ballot marking devices is, let's just confront the error in the elephant in the room. The concern is that you would have the risk of election officials who count the votes having some nefarious way to get an advantage on the election. That has been the whole thing. I was like Deb Harris, because she said this on a call that I attended. She said 36,000 cases of misconduct, prosecutions, these are prosecutions, have a violation official. There are 3,000 jurisdictions, so that's like 3,600 cases where people do incorrect things a year. It's 36,000. That's what it distresses the whereas. I have to disagree with my colleague, Mr. Commissioner Tate. That's what the whereas and that resolution is coming. And they got all the lawsuits. Are we forgetting that there's a lawsuit almost every year in Shelby County? There's a lawsuit almost every year for 10 years. Do we know how much we spend in lawsuits? Is that factored into the cost? Because, people don't blame the machines again. So do we have a number on the, I think I asked for it a couple of months ago. Do we have a number on how much we spend in lawsuits depending people attacking the machines?
Legally, yes. I do believe that we report on that occasionally.
Do you have a rough estimate?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay. Commissioner Taylor asked for instances of people who switched to hand-marked paper ballots or ballot solutions if they had any savings. And I got a few. Knox County just recently switched. The largest counties in Mississippi just switched to hand-marked paper ballots. But most notably, Guilford County in North Carolina switched to hand-marked paper ballots. And they budgeted $8 million and they only needed $2 million. So they saved $6 million from their county, and they spent the $6 million giving the bus drivers raises and putting air conditioners in schools. So I think in the time of COVID, we do have some issues with the budgetary constraints. We don't have a lot of revenue, and I think they got a $7 million shortfall. I do believe, I think me and Commissioner Taylor actually discussed this about COVID. I do think there was a little bit of a flurry, but I'm going to have to defer on this content. Did you know that 68% of all of its cases happened on or after the election? That's a real number. And that number is something that I'm tracking for the World Health Organization. So it actually did go up. And they're pretty under fire about it. I think we kind of say this stuff in a vacuum. So that is entirely real. That is something that is directly related to the case. And the lines was a mile long. So we do have that as a problem, and we are not dealing with the unintended consequence. I ain't gonna try to bully no line. I'm straight. I'm trying to be healed. So with the 36,000 provisional ballots. How many provisional ballots did we hand out in 2018?
I'm sorry, I really don't remember that.
It's around 2,000.
It's right around 2,000.
So the distrust of what's happening with the electoral process is the fact that these ballot marking devices, if you only put 2 in one place, or you put 6 1 here, or you lead a court, there are documented cases where this is happening. This is a voter suppression warning that's coming from this resolution. There are scores of articles where people are talking about the fear. If the power go out in the black areas every election. And am I missing? Don't that happen every time there's election, the power go out. Well, guess what? If the power go out, then I just keep my paper and I keep on writing. And then you just can't when the machine comes back on. So these are very real instances. I am cursed with being in the rabbit hole, so I don't see it, for the one or two things that you hear that public commissioners have the most. I actually hear it from the actual experiences. I literally got on this election commission to prove that elections were real, because so many people came to me and told me that it was getting stolen. That's the only reason why I got on. So these are very real, consequentially, this resolution from the county commissioners, that's a mandate from the voters. The voters are the one that's asking for this. I think Commissioner Williams said he gets more calls about people requesting hand-marked paper ballots in his district. He said that's the most calls he gets. I attended that meeting, it's on the record. There are a ton of people calling and advocating for hand-marked paper ballots. In Knox County, the election administrator said, I trust the systems, but if the citizens do not trust these systems, then let's give them what they want. And they adopted a hand-marked paper ballot. Because the real risk is with lacks of transparency. I think I've been obstructed at every turn for everything. I don't think you gave me anything I asked for since I've been on the commission. I've been fighting tooth and nail to ask for basic things, but you say safeguard these elections, you don't give it to me, and I'm a city commissioner. I fight over and over for every meeting. I have no governors. But if I can't get them as a city election commissioner, then that probably kind of highlights some of the distrust. And if I don't get them, and I don't account to the voters, they say, I'm sad. You wasn't with Republicans. I don't even think this is a partisan issue like that. So, Commissioner Taylor, these are definitely real causes. And this mandate that came on behalf of the County Election Commission was mandated from the voters. And the only reason I speak about that, I'm one voter, but the only reason I speak about it is because I get so many people in my ear, you can imagine how many text messages I got, refuting some of the stuff that I hear y'all say. So I think the sensitivity of the public is what you have to see. Shelby County gets sued a lot. We get sued a lot. And we got chastised by the County Election Commission. And if I remember correctly, I would just challenge you got to back up your numbers, because you said, well, if we go with hand-marked paper ballots, it's going to be $13 million. And then Commissioner Taylor proposes, well, what if we adopt ballot marking basis? And then allow everybody who is asking for a hand-marked paper ballot. What he basically did was double the price. And then you said, well, we may just have to have a few more employees. And so if you don't prepare and do all of the other infrastructure improvements that you're going to have to do, and you get an overwhelming number of people to ask for hand-marked paper ballots, you know what they're going to say about you? That you suppress the vote. Because they came in there and they asked for a hand-marked paper ballot, and you were not able to provide it for them. So I think that's problematic. I do not see the purchase in both solutions. And now, because it's a ballot market device with the option to get a hand-marked paper ballot, that all of a sudden it costs $1 million. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Commissioner Yule. First off, Joe, thank you very much. I think that you were well spoken on what you had to say, but really, any hacking or anything like that is going to be somewhere else other than the voting machines. And many, to your research, and I guess probably you said that a lot of the counties have gone to hand-marked paper ballots. I'm sure that a lot of them have gone to machine, to ballot marking machine. Also, the size of the county must have been pretty small that went to the hand-marked paper ballots, because if they saved $6 million and they gave that money to the bus drivers and air conditioned their schools, it couldn't have been too big.
Commissioner Tate?
Okay. Commissioner Smith brought up something interesting. I know it happened, and I never really given it consideration. But he said that in every election we get sued, and that's reality. What percentage of, would you say, that we won
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I'm sorry.
It's hard to hear through the mask.
Okay. Commissioner Smith said that we get sued in every election. That's the reality. And I never really considered that, even though I do understand we spend a lot of money in that regard. But I was trying to, when you make the statement, I started thinking, how many lawsuits have we lost on one?
Very, very few. We lose very few. Most of them are dismissed. And if they're not dismissed at the trial level or before trial, they're dismissed at the Court of Appeals level. I mean, our rate of success is extremely high in these cases. The fact of the matter is, Commissioner, that since 2000, there has been an explosive growth in election-related litigation. The leading textbook on the subject by Rick Hazen and it's Hazen and Pildes and Sakharov, I think. But anyhow, Hazen is the lead author on this, one of the leading election law scholars. He has a chart in there that shows the increase in election-related litigation, and really since 2000, it's just taken off. So if you're an election commission in this era, you're going to get sued. It's simply a fact of life. But as I say, a lot of these suits are not, they're not well-founded, and we're able to get them dismissed fairly quickly at minimal cost to the commission. And I will say this, having defended the commission for more than 20 years, it's not going to make any difference what kind of equipment you have. If you have hand-marked paper ballots, you will get sued. If you have ballot marking devices, you will get sued. The commission got sued when it had the old Shubtronic machines, if you remember those, mechanical machines. It got sued when they went to the touchscreen machines. So a lot of these are a fact of life, and I don't think the type of equipment will either increase or diminish the number of lawsuits. That's fine.
Commissioner Taylor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to give Ms. Phillips an opportunity to address a point raised by Commissioner Smith about the cost of hand-marked paper ballots versus ballot marking devices, and how you square that with my question to you about paper or plastic on election day, and why do you think the cost is negligible in that?
Well, I think, other communities that do offer that option, the vast majority of their voters choose ballot marking devices. So based on the few that I know that offer both options, I do some more research on it, but we have to print paper ballots anyway for provisional. We have to have emergency ballots. First couple elections, I might print a few more, but they're there, and our people know how to use them. So I just, unless there's an enormous groundswell of, 100% of the voters decide they want to vote on paper ballots, then I don't see there'd be a lot of difference there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to get, all right, Commissioner Smith.
But didn't you say in the presentation that they didn't want to do it? So they had so many voter errors and the straight marks and all, did all they go out of the window? You said that.
I still see it.
I was asking about them not being able to use it, and then you said, oh, they use it as long as they have VMPB.
Well, I think the people who are passionate about this issue are less likely to make voter error.
So I'll do it wrong with stuff. But I would, to clarify something for Commissioner Taylor, you brought up the barcode. And that's the largest issue. The entire state of Georgia is being sued for this right now. That the requirement for a voter to verify his choice means they can read what is being counted. And what is being counted in the instance of a ballot marking device is not what they read. It's a barcode. And I don't read barcode. If y'all do, I'll show you here. But there is a reason that a gallon of milk is different in Fraser than the same gallon of milk with the same barcode in Germantown. And that's inventory. You can control pricing in a barcode. I've written code for manufacturing. I can make a barcode say whatever I want to under it. And that's what all the experts are saying, that barcode can be misrepresented, and it can show you something. And with respect to you tired, Commissioner Young? You tired? We want to sidebar? Okay, so, with respect to the hand-marked paper ballot. The hand-marked paper ballot is not showing you a barcode. It's showing you a coordinate plane. It's telling you that on row 10, column 7, if you stop at something that's built in, that's the choice that somebody made. And that is on digital technology. Everything that everybody's discussing was before digital technology came in. Does anybody know what that first iPhone looked like? It came out in 2007. Right? So the notion that hardware is supposed to be kept for 10 years, do you know what your phone looked like 10 years ago? So we're going to spend millions of dollars for something that's already obsolete. The software is already outdated, it's not patched, it's not, you got all these other problems with the software. And then you say you can keep it for 10 years. But with respect to the barcode, there was a vendor, and I know we're trying to keep the vendors out of it. They published that the ballot marking device will show you the same thing. It will show you row 9, column 7. Ain't no columns on no ballot marking device. Ain't no columns. And then the PR article that they did, they had somebody vote for the same person twice. If you actually looked at the barcode, it had the same person up in the summary twice. That is problematic. You cannot read it. And I would also, Lynn Bernstein of North Carolina, she's an aeronautics engineer. She did a study of the properties of the thermal paper. And with COVID-19, if you wipe it down the screens with alcohol, the heat and the alcohol reacts with the ballot marking device paper. So if you use a hand gel and sanitizer, as soon as you get your ballot and walk into the scanner, it'll wipe your ink off. So you got a whole lot of options for error. So I think it's disingenuous to say that paper, which you can authenticate in all cases. Commissioner, Ms. Phillips, when you printed me this packet, why did you give me this in paper? Why did you give me a soft copy of all this? I got like 700 pages of paper here. Why did you give it to me in soft copy?
Because that was on the advice of counsel.
Why did it be right?
That they'd done it to make sure that it couldn't be easily duplicated.
Dang. So what they did was they made a security measure. And they said, for a security measure, I'm going to make you print it out in paper. You see the irony in this? For a security measure, they gave you a directive to reduce me to paper so that I couldn't duplicate it. That is my case.
I'd like to comment on one thing you said, Commissioner. I don't know what the status of the lawsuit in Georgia is, but perhaps you can explain the rather stunning lawsuit in Pennsylvania over that same issue that was just handed down.
Well, that's like 4 in Georgia, so you know. Right.
No, I'm not familiar with
You sent me the,
I don't think.
you sent me the
Which
decision, the ESMS versus the Joe Stein.
That case.
Yeah.
That case.
Well, that's a recap.
Yeah.
Not exactly.
That case. There have been so many stunning decisions in the past couple of months that I'm having trouble keeping up with all of them. Yeah, there was a case in Pennsylvania where the electronic system that was being used, which I think was an ESNS system, was attacked in court, and the judge found the testimony of the witnesses against the system to be, trying to remember the exact words he used, whether he described their testimony as laughable or ridiculous or absurd, but he otherwise dismissed the credibility of the expert witnesses produced by the plaintiffs in some very explicit language. Is that the case?
Yeah, so I'll raise you 3 other cases that are processing forward.
Commissioner Taylor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand what Commissioner said, Commissioner Smith said about the barcode. However, that could be verified by simply counting the paper ballot and counting the actual votes as it's printed off. That would reconcile.
Yeah, that's exactly how we do pre-testing, pre-election testing, and post-election audits.
We don't do post-election audits, so.
We would be required to with this new system.
I think you said, I think you were on the record many times saying that we would not be trying to adopt it in audit method. And I think Mr. Weinberg asked you if you considered risk limit audits, and you said no. Also, with security on the scoring document, what was the highest scoring that you could get for security on the scoring document?
I'm sorry, I really don't remember.
What was that? You could get, what is it, a scale of 1 to 10?
Joe, do you remember? Because I really don't. It had a number of different components.
It wasn't 1 to 10, but I don't remember exactly.
Well, whatever the highest number is, you rated it as a 2.
I think there was more than that with security.
And there was another one as a 5.
Out of 100 points.
Mr. Chairman, if we could, I know the public's been waiting patiently to speak, and unless there are other comments from commissioners, I'd like to hear from the public.
I do have one other comment before we go into the public. And that was to say that, because we didn't do much about the actual costs. I am considerably displeased with the information that was provided to me. I had to go to purchase it on my own. And you guys have not been afforded to see the actual cost that was submitted by the vendors. We are looking at a cost that has been changed, and the term that is being used for this cost method is normalized, where the quantities are not in the quantities that was submitted by the vendor. It is a interpreted modification of what is expected from our administrator without any guidance from the commissioners on any part of this process. And I see some costs that are submitted by the vendor, and they're 53% higher when I see it after Administrator Phillips has done what she thinks is necessary to it. So I'm a bit moved, and I think it's kind of incredible. I do have some discontent about this part of the process, and I also know that I had to sign a non-disclosure. I guess you guys know, I'm no longer with it. So I guess you guys can sign a non-disclosure. So I do have a question for the attorney. If I'm the authority on record, who am I bound to from the non-disclosure? That's a dude.
Sorry.
Let me get the
See it from back there, probably.
To the election commission.
But I am the commissioner.
You're a commissioner.
So if I breached the, who gave?
If you breached it, what would be, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if the policy maker is me and the 4 members, and the administrator who's a staff member, who works for the commissioners, gives me a non-disclosure, then if I violate that, what authority did she operate under to give me a non-disclosure?
That would be the authority of the election commission to operate, to protect the process that we've been directed to follow by contracts administration.
The same under that gave me all of the costs.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. We've been directed to follow this process and not to reveal this information until the intent to award is issued.
I'm just
So that's the purpose of the non-disclosure, is that it not be disclosed.
So who said
Until
it?
it's legal to disclose it.
Right, so who set the policy directive for Administrator Phillips to give me this? Would that have come from this body?
We were asked how to protect the confidentiality of it, and the best we could do is come up with a non-disclosure.
Was that purchasing that? Who did you?
Purchasing has told us, and this we believe to be in accordance with state law.
Right, but when you came up with the policy directive, who discussed that?
Who discussed that?
Yeah, somebody said, hey, let's get a non-disclosure and make everybody feel like, who did that?
That was discussed by the attorneys, with the administrator, and I believe we may have talked with Chairman Sampson, but I know we talked to the administrator.
So the chairman has the ability to operate without the commission?
The commission has the authority to enforce state law.
The commission is a private body. Then he has the authority to operate on his own, is the question. I was a little offended by getting a non-disclosure. I think I told Commissioner Taylor that when you came down here, I was like, you know, file a non-disclosure. I don't know if you bound to, but so I felt the need to ask for it. I read in the statute, you put it up, but the statute says that the administrator is in charge of the day-to-day operations, right? We don't do a budget day to day, so she's not the person to set a budget. The commission is. We don't buy equipment every 10 years, every day. So she's not supposed to do that either. That's the commissioner's job. Am I saying that correctly? That's not a day-to-day operation, for sure.
This is you were required by state law not to disclose this information.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the information in the disclosure of it. I got 2 copies. I got one for purchasing. They didn't make me sign a non-disclosure. And what they gave me had more, and they had all the real information. And I didn't have to sign anything. But I don't want to go to the point, it seemed like I'm not going to answer, but I just wanted to know about the non-disclosure piece.
There's a white convertible with the top down, off the parking lot would start to rain.
I guess we'll move to public comment. We have some questions or something there that was sent in that I can't see from here, so somebody's gonna have to read it. And then we'll take those, and then we can either, y'all wanna take them first, or you wanna take them after we get our speakers with the hand?
Are you highlighting what I should read?
Nope, it's up to the discretion of the committee.
Just go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, you want me to read those comments?
Yeah, go ahead and read those.
Thank you. I need to go.
We'll start at the top.
It's up to y'all's discretion.
Mr. Chairman, the first one says they have no sound. That's from John Brady, that he's left. Comment number 2 is, why did you keep the public out for 48 minutes? That's from Ms. Moses. Mr. Chairman, I think that probably be appropriate for the attorney to answer again. The question, Mr. Ryder, was why did the public be kept out for 48 minutes?
Yeah, thank you. Second ran over.
Okay, all right. The executive session ran over the answer to that question. The next comment is, this is not acceptable software. You kept the public out. How do we ask a question? Ms. Moses has left the meeting. There are 11 people in the room. Again, from Ms. Moses. Please screenshot for Ms. Moses. This is an impressively one-sided presentation. Wow, that's from Rich Gorello. Who is speaking at the moment? Asked the attendee that showed up too late to hear the introduction. That was from Joe Kennery. He's since left the meeting. What was the scoring based on? That's what determines which system is chosen. That's from, again, Mr. Gorello. What is the scoring based on? That's what determines which system is chosen. And Ms. Phillips has left the room.
She took a break.
All right, Mr. Young, do you feel comfortable answering that question?
Read the question again.
The question is, what is the scoring based on that's used to determine which system?
a scorecard is developed based on the contents of the RFP in this instance. There were some county requirements in the RFP, and then there were some departmental requirements in the RFP. The purchasing department developed a weighting system for us to, using a spreadsheet essentially, to score each aspect of the RFP. So that was developed both with the cooperation and guidance of the purchasing department, as well as the person who actually developed the scorecard. I think administrative books developed that.
I have a question, Bill. You said that the county developed a rating system for rating the weight to allocate scores. This question.
They developed a, basically a spreadsheet that allowed the person who developed the scorecard to weight, I think the total was 100 points, and assign values to each one of the questions, the maximum number of points that the vendor could get for each question.
Did we have any input in that regard?
Did we have any
input to?
The answer is yes. We did. Administrative Phillips, I think, developed that particular scorecard.
I think you're asking if the commissioners had any.
No.
Well, I have. Did the commissioners have any?
No.
Do you want me to?
No, I developed the scorecard and then passed it along to other staff members for their opinions.
So where are the commissioners supposed to have?
If I may, typically the commission has never been involved with the development of scorecards. That included the scorecards that was used for the technical consulting phase of the voter registration system. We use a scorecard for deciding on the drainage vendors. That is usually considered an administrative function and not that of the policy board. So this will be the first time that I'm aware of the commission wanting or being involved in developing a scorecard.
So are you familiar with voter matrix? The voter matrix?
Yes.
Did the commissioners have input in that?
No.
The commission did have input in that. I looked at it.
And the voting matrix?
Yeah, the voter matrix.
All right, Commissioner Smith, let's answer the question, not have any comments between our two.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the next question is, what does service contracts include INVMB estimate? That's from Dana Alexander. I don't know if that's a misspelling or that's an acronym.
Well, just move on to the next
All
question.
right. Dana Alexander, next question is correction of question. Does the VMD, okay, that makes more sense now, Mr. Chairman. Does the VMD budget estimate include service contract costs for the time span presented?
Yes or no?
Yes.
That question came from Dana Alexander. Ms. Moses, why did Commissioner Taylor leave without Pablo Barrera? He asked for discussion. That's from Ms. Moses. I'm back now. I'll let everyone know. I'm sure they're glad to know I'm back, Mr. Chairman. The next question from Lulu Freesdat. My name is Lulu Freesdat. I'm the co-director of Smart Elections. I am election security journalist. I would like to speak. Mr. Chairman, anyone who wishes to speak verbally can do so on the website. Raise their hand icon, and they'll be called on after we go through the record comments. The next question, Mr. Chairman, bad optics with all African Americans on one side of the room and Caucasians on the other. That's from Mr. Harris. He is the only one that noticed that. That was certainly by accident that occurred. The next question is from Louis Friesdat. Is the public going to be allowed to speak?
We need to limit these people to one question.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, all I can do is, I don't know who's the comment till I read it. It seems to me is for the public to speak after a vote. That's again from Ms. Friesdat. The only thing I would say there, Mr. Chairman, I think it's more important that the public speak after we debate, because we may say something in debate that they wish to speak on, but they wouldn't know otherwise. So I would make that comment. From Ms. Moses, why is an attorney Ryder having sidebar conversation with Commissioner Yulhorn? The next question, or comment, Dana Alexander, how can 10 years be expected lifespan of ballot marking device systems if they run Windows 7 operating system? Windows 7 is not supported by Microsoft for 10 more years. That is a similar point to Commissioner Smith's point. Mr. Chairman, at some point you may want to have Ms. Phillips address that point, and I'd like to know the answer to that as well. Next item, next comment, I would like to make a statement about the motion. That's Chris Teleska, and he can make a statement either in writing or by raising a hand. I want my 3 minutes, and I will sue if I don't get it, Ms. Moses. I promise Ms. Moses will make sure she gets her 3 minutes. The next question, how will I be able to speak? Just simply raise your hand with the little hand icon on the computer. Chris Teleska would like to make a comment. He's called in. That's from Lynn Bernstein. Again, all right. Lulu Friesdat, I am a co-founder of Smart Elections. She'd like to speak. Again, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand with the icon on the computer screen. The next comment is an epistle, and from Mr. Keller, and I'll begin reading. Good evening, my name is Brian Keller. I'm the public policy and voting attorney for Disability Rights Tennessee, a statewide nonprofit legal services organization that protects the rights of Tennesseans with disabilities. Our existence is congressionally mandated, and we are federally funded. Part of our federal mandate is to ensure that elections are accessible for voters with disabilities. Specifically, we're charged with making sure that elections comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. There are 3 possible ways that hand-marked paper ballots could be used, and each one violates federal law. The use of hand-marked ballots as the primary voting method violates the ADA. It prevents people with disabilities from fully participating in the electoral process, either because they cannot see or cannot mark the ballot. I myself have low vision and would have difficulty voting using a hand-marked paper ballot. Hybrid systems that only use ballot marking devices for voters with disabilities creates a segregated voting system and puts precinct officers in a position of having to decide who qualifies to use marking devices and who does not. Hybrid systems clearly violate federal law. Nationally, we can leave the screen up. Nationally, we have seen that systems in which the choice is left to the voter results in poorly trained and underprepared poll workers. We also routinely see machines that are not properly set up or lack the accessibility equipment that is mandated by federal law. Tennessee already has a significant voter participation gap between Tennesseans with disability and those without. In fact, we have one of the largest gaps in the country. Any method other than using a ballot marking device as the primary method will only grow the gap and disenfranchise voters. Thank you for your time, and please keep us appraised of your efforts to keep elections accessible. All right, and the next comment, Mr. Chairman, is from Chris Teleska. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is in Wake County. It's North Carolina's largest county based on voter registration. I worked with North Carolina Verified Voting and helped pass our Public Confidence in Elections Act back in 2005, and have worked with county election boards all over my state since then. I've never seen a board of elections tell board members and voters they couldn't disclose issues of cost of vendor machines. I want to see that in writing, not take the word alone of anyone, even a lawyer. I'd like to see the actual written determination of the lawyers in the purchasing department, RE non-disclosure, including legal citations. helped Wake County stay with 100% hand-marked paper ballots back in 2006. I was mostly based on cost. Hand-marked paper ballots are always lower in cost versus DRE machines, or what you refer to as ballot marking devices. When you factor in cost per registered voter or look at the cost of hand-marked paper ballots, and one ADA compliant ballot marking device like an auto mark is always less than 10, 15 ballot marking devices and one scanner needed at each polling place. In Wake County, we just replaced all of the old M100 scanners with newer DS200 scanners. We kept our auto mark machines, which also bought 3 newer high-speed scanners for the absentee by mail ballots. We spent $1.3 million to do. I'm sorry. At the 3 minutes up on that comment?
We don't know. We don't know.
No.
So you're not.
No, we're fine, we're at minute 38 seconds.
All right, we spent $1.3 million on 270 DS200 scanners plus 3 high-speed scanners and some other equipment. Mecklenburg County, North Carolina has voted for the same number of voters, but they went with 10 to 15 express vote BMDs and 1 DS200 scanner at each polling place, plus 3 high-speed scanners for APM ballots. They budgeted $15 million for all that equipment. They could do essentially the same as setup for Wake County as for as little as $2.5 million. Mecklenburg County will never save the difference of $12.5 million over the life of the equipment because there is no massive savings using all ballot marking devices we've ever seen in North Carolina. Back in 2006, our legislature decided to fully fund the cost of scanner and auto mark and let the DRE counties pay for the extra money. That's why over 70 of our 100 counties decided to go 100% paper. When we had to replace our machines this year, 0 counties switched from paper to BMD and several other counties, like Guilford and Forsyth, went from DRE to paper. I urge you to put off voting on this tonight. I ask your ED to contact other counties in your state and others to provide you with an actual cost figure and savings that 100% paper counties have over a partial or full BMD jurisdiction. I don't even get me started on how much your voters will thank me. Time's up. All right, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I read as fast as I could.
You're doing great.
Next question, Lulu Frisdad. I don't understand where I'm supposed to speak. Again, check your hand raising icon on the computer. Question to Linda Phillips. What is her role in Phillips and Jones? I don't see a hand to raise. That's for Ms. Moses. Mr. Chairman, stop me at any time if you
go to the next question.
Next, Chris,
comment.
Next comment, Chris Telesco. I would like 3 minutes for a statement. Please raise your hand on the icon on the computer screen. Carmen Johnson, John Ryder, so entrenched in the National Republican Party. How can he be impartial? Chris Telesco, he's raised his hand. Ms. Moses, there is no hand icon. Ms. Moses, again, I found it. Y'all should use Zoom. This is too complicated. Chris Teleska, I can make my own statement. And Lulu Frisdad, my hand has been raised for hours. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes the written comments, and I would recommend we move forward with callers.
Move on. Go ahead.
Richmond Hall.
Go ahead, sir. You have 3 minutes.
It looks like he has not entered a PIN number, so we'll move to the next.
Okay.
Carol Chumney.
Go ahead. You have 3 minutes,
Tell
man.
Mr. Richmond to get a PIN number.
For the safeguards of our fundamental right to vote, as you consider a new voting process, consider what you have been made aware of over the past several months as to the serious vulnerabilities with our current DRE voting system as documented in Voting on Thin Ice, available at www.votingonthin-ice.com. For example, the current voting machines and tabulator have been exposed to the internet as verified by the independent tasser as well as the current ESMS vendor. Votes insecurely remotely transferred on election nights. Unauthorized editing software found on the system that allows manual editing of the votes with a report that election summary reports are being edited. Prior multiple unauthorized users and passwords insecurely emailed. Databases insecurely remotely transferred even out of the country. 100 vote variances on voting machines, vote flipping, communication breakdowns between the machines and the server, repeated unexplained upload of memory cards or failure to upload memory cards carrying votes, thousands given the wrong ballot, thousands not found in e-poll books, a former Shelby County election commissioner stating she believes manipulation occurs at zones and possibly tabulation. None of this has been resolved with investigation or forensic audit. You have not properly dealt with these things. The past is prologue to the future. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Please, as a body, do the appropriate due diligence as to the current selection process. Please do not buy more touchscreen computers that will hide votes in barcodes, especially when you have not resolved what is going on over the past decade, and especially when these machines will be hooked up to parts of the current compromised voting system. You and the public deserve independent, legal, and expert advice to ensure the selection process is not tainted and complies with all applicable state laws, rules, and regulations. That also requires the client being advised to get independent legal and expert advice. You are charged to ensure that the ultimate new system implemented reliably and accurately records the voters' choices without fear of hacking or risk of tampering. Even Administrator Phillips acknowledged in her presentation the risk of hacking by ballot marking devices. You have a fiduciary obligation to the public. Hand-marked paper ballots are the only secure way to move forward are what is recommended by cybersecurity experts across the country, cost substantially less, are used across the country, avoid manipulation of the voter's choice by a ballot marking machine, address the pandemic risk, and avoid inside.
Okay. Let's go to Richmond Hall.
You have 3 minutes, sir.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm a recent college grad, just heard about this issue and wanted to weigh in, so thank you for your time. Specifically, I wanted to talk about voter error and the poll worker error. So as I understand it, the poll worker has to write a serial code on each of the ballots, and then the voter manually fills out the full ballot. I just wanted to say, in college, I was a data science and statistics major, and there are whole classes dedicated to dealing with bad data because, I mean, you would be surprised. It does not matter how simple the form is, the poll, whatever people are filling out, it causes significant issues. And I just think come election day, if paper ballots were rolled out, all hell would break loose. There would be so many issues, so much discrepancy. The line would be out the door. And as you know it, people can't just stand there for 10 hours a day and wait to vote. And as far as just quickly, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a $9 million difference. It just doesn't make sense to me how this is really a question. I'm sure the $9 million can be better spent in another area. And really just after listening to the whole debate, I really don't get how this is an issue. I think the paper ballots would cause significant issues, obviously $9 million more dollars than the electronic system, and 500 more workers on election day. There's already issues with trying to get workers. I just clearly in favor of going with the electric voting machines, but thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Next speaker, please.
Erica Sugarman.
Go ahead, Ms. Sugarman.
Yes. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. We know for senior was won in 1970, it was because my father, the late Judge Russell Sugarman, and others stormed the election commission and found boxes upon boxes of absentee paper ballots that were hidden. In paper absentee ballots that were found. If they were hidden in a computer, they may not have ever been found. We, the people of Shelby County, want the following. We want hand-marked paper ballots that are then scanned and a digital picture is taken of the ballot, and the ballot is then stored in a locked box. We want hand-marked paper ballots because the physical ballot and the digital image of the ballot can be compared to each other and to the election total. We want this board to abide by Shelby County Commission's resolutions for hand-marked paper ballots. We want this administrator and all future administrators to have all processes, procedures, and purchases approved by this board who have oversight power. We want written public procedures for processing mail-in ballots and on-site ballots. We want a written public chain of custody. We want the same voting system as Knox County hand-marked paper ballots. We want 6 high-speed scanners which can process both mail-in and on-site ballots. We want all Shelby County election meetings to be video recorded and the minutes written and posted within 3 days. We want Shelby County Election Commission meetings to be held in accordance to the First Amendment, Sunshine Laws, and Freedom of Information Act. We want Phillips to go ahead and sign the letter of intent, which she has the power and the authority to do so, and the public can then discuss the voting systems. We, the people of Shelby County, do not want the following. We do not want ballot marking devices because they have been known to cause long lines, which results in voter suppression. We do not want ballot marking devices because the maintenance and license fees over 15 years will be extremely expensive. We do not want election systems and software, also known as ES&S. They will lowball us in the beginning and then suck it to us year after year. We do not want ES&S because their machines are overpriced and insecure voting machines. We do not want ES&S because they do not disclose to the people that the RFP includes remote access to the tabulator where the election totals are kept. We do not understand.
Lawrence, you have 3 minutes for your comment, please. You may begin now.
Carmen Johnson.
John Wright, when are you going to resign?
Next speaker, please.
Stephen Mulroy.
Go ahead, Mr. Mulroy, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Steve Mulroy, 1035 Perkins Terrace. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to attempt to rebut about an hour's worth of disinformation in 3 minutes, and I'm going to fail, but I'm going to make the valiant attempt. You've been told that the state law requires the unwarranted secrecy of this process. I don't believe that's true. State law does not require that it has to be the county mayor that issues the letter of intent to award. That could have been issued by Ms. Phillips. You could have adopted the procedure that Knox County actually did adopt, which wasn't secret in this way, or you could have adopted the Taylor plan. Nothing in state law prevents any of that. Since the stories came out about Mr. Ryder and Ms. Phillips, I've looked into it. I'm not accusing Mr. Ryder or Ms. Phillips of any actual ethical violations, but the lack of transparency in this process is undermined by the failure to disclose. In Ms. Phillips' case, the county attorney memorandum requires disclosure to evaluators and all persons who make the decision, including the election commission. Commissioner Norma Lester says that there was no such disclosure at the time, and the contemporaneous minutes also document that. On the substance, all the assertions that you heard from Ms. Phillips, not one of them was sourced. Every assertion we've made in this process, including every assertion I'm about to make, is sourced, and I can provide those sources. Specifically talking about the cost issue, we gave you not one, not two, but 3 different independent, highly detailed studies, including one from the organization Voter Georgia, which rebutted the idea, the farcical idea, that it's going to cost $11 million or $15 million in paper over the life of the system, and it's going to be $9 million more. You spend $4.23 per voter in Knox County with hand-marked paper ballots versus $12 per voter in ballot marking device Davidson. I know you've heard that you're going to have to hire 500 more personnel, but Hamilton County did not hire a single extra personnel when they converted 22 years ago from a computerized touchscreen system to a hand-marked paper ballot system, and they will tell you that they haven't increased their operational costs. You've heard problems about operational difficulties, privacy sleeves, etc. Hamilton County reports no such problems. You hear that ballot on-demand printers can't work. DeSoto County won't tell you that. They're planning to do it in Hamilton County. Ms. Phillips says that most hand-marked paper ballot jurisdictions don't use ballot on-demand printers because they're so fraught with peril. It's actually the opposite of that. Most of them do. I can't go on because I'm running out of time, but I would like to mention that with respect to the disability complaint you heard, I checked with the Center for Independent Living. They had no problem with the system that we've been proposing. And I'll just conclude by saying that the overwhelming public comment and the county commission, your funding body, have said, please don't do this.
Lynn Bernstein.
Go ahead, Ms. Bernstein, state your name and address for the record, please.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, my name is Lynn Bernstein. I live at 104 Windy Point Lane in Cary, North Carolina. You said that all computers can be hacked, yet you recommend using 2 computers in the system instead of just 1. That doubles your risk at a minimum. We accept the risk for a scanner because people don't want to count by hand. And I agree with that. That has more benefits than it does risk. But there is not enough benefit to add a second unnecessary computer, which is really just an attack vector. An audit is only as good as the evidence you are auditing. Think about it. Eyewitness testimony isn't as strong as video evidence. BMDs require voters to use visual recall, and humans just are not good at this task. There's no way to know what the voter saw on the screen when you use a ballot marking device. With a hand-marked paper ballot, it's the only method of voting that leaves a primary evidence source. You have the actual ballot that the voter saw. And there's really no way to sugarcoat what Mrs. Phillips presented. Really does sound like the same vendor talking points that we heard all throughout North Carolina. Commissioner Taylor is correct. It is counterintuitive that hand-marked paper ballots cost more, because they don't. Think about it for a minute, folks. You have a pen and paper, and you're telling me that costs more than a pen plus a stylus and machines that are thousands of dollars each. Let's talk about storage. By federal law, you have to store ballots for 22 months. And either way, you're storing ballots. You're talking about having more storage with just hand-marked paper ballots, but you're not thinking about all those extra machines that you're going to have to store that also need temperature and moisture control. And the one that I find most offensive is the rigorous testing claim. I'm an aerospace engineer with extensive experience in integration and test. Ballot marking devices are not tested extensively. No amount of logic and accuracy testing can assure that the ballot marking device has been programmed correctly or has malicious software installed. There is just no way to run that many tests to assure that. And Phil Stark from Berkeley wrote, I believe it was a 16-page paper that I'm happy to send you, stating just that. In fact, ballpoint pens have more federal regulations than election equipment. So personally, I would like to recommend seeing the evidence that Mrs. Phillips presented. She didn't cite any of those things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to the next speaker, please.
Jennifer Cohen.
Okay, ma'am, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm sorry?
You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Your name and address for the record.
Jennifer Cohn, C-O-H-N. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm an attorney and national election integrity advocate and freelance journalist. I've written extensively about the problems with ballot marking devices. I want to refute the notion that touch screens are somehow immune from voter error. That is patently absurd. Every election we hear about touch screens flipping votes. We heard it in 2018 about Georgia. We heard it in 2018 about Texas. And in both of those cases, the secretaries of state attributed the reports of vote flipping to voter error in using the touch screen. In Pennsylvania, we also had, very recently, in the last year, we had massive problems with vote flipping with the new ES&S Express Vote XL machines. I heard the ES&S representatives state on camera that there would be no calibration issues with their new systems. And yet 1/3 of the voting machines in Northampton County had miscalibration problems. That is also, by the way, human error. A big problem when you're using these touchscreens is that most of these errors, most of this vote flipping is likely to go unnoticed. A recent study, and I'm happy to give you a copy, showed that 93% of touchscreen errors, vote flips and vote additions or vote deletions, go unnoticed. Almost all election security experts consider hand-marked paper ballots the gold standard of election integrity. During the Minnesota recount, a bipartisan panel agreed to the intent of all but 14 out of 3 million hand-marked paper ballots. Optical or digital scanners can also catch any stray marks that result in overvotes, and they can also catch undervotes and alert the voter. So the notion that voter error is a significant problem with hand-marked paper ballots is absurd. Touchscreens also cause long lines. ES&S itself has admitted this. Studies have shown this. Maryland, which tried the express vote for the first statewide a few years ago, all but one county refused or objected to using them again for universal use because they caused long lines. And the reason is obvious. They create a bottleneck because they limit the number of people who can fill out their ballot concurrently to the number of touch screens at the polling place. It makes it almost impossible to scale up if there is greater than expected turnout. With hand-marked paper ballots, there is almost no limit to the number of voters who can vote concurrently, making it very easy to scale up with inexpensive cardboard privacy dividers. Long lines are voter suppression.
Mr. Chairman.
ES&S ballot marking devices take voters 3 times as long to use.
Move to the next one. Next speaker, please. He's already spoken.
Okay.
Next speaker.
D. Nollner.
Ms. Nollner, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record, please. Chase Willis, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Chase Willis, 3653 Douglas Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Well, I called in with one comment, but I got 2 now. The first one was that it doesn't make any sense to me to use paper over machines for security, because we use all our banking information and finances are electronic. I don't know how you could have something that was more secure enough for our finances and for everybody's, livelihood and money. But then we want to go paper with the voting, which seems just as important, if not more. So that was what I wanted to call in and say. But listening to the presentation tonight, it seems like there's a lot of issues with the coronavirus if we did the paper. You have all these people handing around secret slips to cover them and got to hand it back and forth. But then you got more people coming over all online, and having to have more poll workers seems like it could be a health crisis, having all those people together. That's it.
All right, hold on before we go to the next one. I'm going to ask commissioners, at what point in time do y'all want to cut this off? Because I have to notify them.
How many calls do we have in the queue?
How many people are in the queue?
Besides Mr. Mulroy, 3 others.
Oh, okay, go ahead. That's all.
4 now.
We think 9 o'clock?
D. Nollner.
Yeah. Ms. Nollner? Go ahead, sir. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Chris Telska.
Hello, this is Chris. Can you hear me?
Name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Chris Telesta. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, 70110 Barkway, Raleigh, North Carolina. I think the main reason I called in was because it sounds like the procedures that are described for approving or not approving this contract or purchasing seem to be a little opaque. I live in North Carolina, and no county board of election director or board elections member would ever dream of, you know, asking people to vote on stuff sight unseen. Back when we were looking to do either DREs or paper ballots, we were able to compare and contrast the actual cost of, you know, cost per registered voter and total costs. And everywhere that we've ever looked, not only in North Carolina, but also elsewhere, other states, paper always costs less per registered voter, and whenever you added up all the costs over time. And most recently in North Carolina, my county, Wake County, spent about $1.3 million switching over to the new DS200s, whereas Mecklenburg County spent $15 million going with DS200s and express votes. Not just Guilford County doing that and saving a lot of money, but also Mecklenburg County, a county that's essentially got the same number of voters as Wake County does. Y'all might not be doing a whole lot of in-person voting come the fall, and if you stuck with a DS200 auto mark system, even if you didn't have people showing up in person to vote, you'd still have all your paper ballots printed up. You wouldn't have any extra money, spent on equipment that, you'd have to hire extra people to swab down the touchscreens in between each and every voter. And it's also been my experience that lines are longer where there's touchscreens involved than when there are paper ballots. And you only need one auto mark per precinct or early voting site, and that rarely gets used. But according to the ADA, poll workers aren't supposed to determine whether or not a voter is disabled and can use the ADA compliant machine. So I just wanted to correct a few things that I thought don't quite jive with the way I understand election law. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Move to the next voter. Next speaker.
Lulu Fresdet.
Go ahead, ma'am. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my volume down because I'm getting an echo. So can someone put their hand up when I'm at my 3-minute limit? My name is Lulu Fresdet. I'm an election security journalist. I live in New York, and the level of misinformation that has been presented tonight, in particular by Ms. Phillips and also by some of the speakers, is actually shocking to me after having studied and researched these issues for over 10 years. What I want to particularly focus on, because there was a lot of misinformation and it's not possible to address it all, but there's a kind of equivalency language happening where people at the meeting, the commissioners, and I respect that you've done a lot of work on this, but you're saying, well, the scanners can be hacked, VMBs can be hacked, so what difference does it make? But it actually makes a very, very significant difference what type of technology you use. And the reason is that if a ballot marking device is hacked, you have no way of going back and finding out what was the intent of the voter. Because if the machine is hacked, it will print out a paper ballot with a fake candidate selection. With hand-marked paper ballots that are fed through scanners, if the scanner is hacked, you can always go back to that hand-marked paper ballot and you know that you have voter intent there. And as Ms. Cohn said, there are hand-counted races like in 2008 in Minnesota that showed that hand-marked paper ballots are remarkably accurate. They were able to determine the result up to 0.01%. there were some other really critical points of misinformation. There was an advocate from the disability community who said that the use of hand-marked paper ballots violates the ADA. It absolutely does not violate the ADA. As long as you have a device available for voters with disabilities, which all jurisdictions have at this point, you are in compliance with the ADA. And there was also voters who said, for example, that the financial industry is all computerized. That also is not accurate. The financial industry always has paper backups. So what I really want to communicate to you is that you're making a critical decision here, and there's a lot of kind of outside noise, outside information talking about, well, there's, Mr. Young spoke about all the misinformation and the social media campaigns. That's not what you're deciding. What you're deciding here tonight or in the next few weeks is whether or not your system is going to be secure, accurate, and auditable. A ballot marking device is not auditable. And this was published in a paper that's going to be in the Georgetown Law Technology Review by two experts, Philip Stark and Andrew Appel, and they said specifically.
Move to the next speaker.
George Monger.
George Monger. You got 3 seconds, sir. Please
I
take-
just will be brief. I just think that this body handles public comments in probably the most deplorable way that anybody in Shelby County does.
Rich Gorella.
Yes, hello. My name is Rich Gorella. You can hear me, I assume?
Yeah. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Yes. My name is Rich Gorella from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My address is 1642 South Bancroft Street. I work with a group called Protect Our Vote Philly, and we've been watching our own city's purchase of ES&S Express Vote, in this case Express Vote XL, voting machines last year, which were first used in November. I want to read a few trouble reports these are submitted by poll workers back to the central office when they're having trouble with the voting machines that are brand new voting machines that cost us $8,000 a piece. And I'll just read through a few of them. Too many selections, system lags. These are poll workers asking for help from the main office. Code keeps coming up to be entered, tried to recalibrate, can't open polls. Error opening, tried hard reset, still get invalid code. Machine not powering on, reset, then it wouldn't accept ballot. Screen slow to show selections being made. Ballot paper jam. Second light not on, machine not turning on. Machine frozen. Calibration issue. Cannot lock top panel, tried. City official took it out of service. Media door will not lock. Paper stuck, though there is no ballot in it. Machine won't turn on. CFast card error. Printer not able to print. Paper is coming out, but nothing on it. Paper stuck in ballot reader. Cleared out, still will not take ballots. Machine will print ballot and then kick it out. In addition, the other machines will not read the ballot. Screen frozen, machine went down. Calibration issue persisting after rover and tech visits and phone support. I could go on for a while because there are 600 of these trouble reports from these first outings in Philadelphia after the city spent $29 million in taxpayer money on the top of the line ballot marking device that ES&S sells. We could have gotten a hand-marked ballot system like Pittsburgh got for just over 1/3 of the price, $11 million. Hand-marked systems are what is used by most of the country, including major cities, including large cities all over the place. And the problems that people are listing are simply not major complaints in these places. I urge Shelby County not to make a mistake and listen to this real vendor hogwash that you're hearing. Thank you.
How many speakers are left in the queue?
We've got Miss Python, and I think we've attempted the other two. Lulu, have we gone to Lulu yet?
Yeah.
Okay, then this one.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Miss Python. Suzanne.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, good evening. My name is Susan Pinchon. I'd like to ask all of you on the commission to open your minds for just a couple minutes and consider the fact that you have been wrong about the benefits of ballot marking devices. Ballot marking devices cannot be audited. The person who spoke about all the technology in banking, you know if you put $10 in the bank and you know if the electronic system records it properly. When you let go of that screen, you don't know how your vote is going to be recorded, how the barcode is going to read it. And this whole process has been, I'm going to switch subjects quickly because I agree with previous speakers, this has been an incredible disinformation campaign. I'm going to send you an email. Ron Wyden in Washington, D.C. just called ES&S slimy, I believe was the word. The number of times it's been sued for breaking the law, just for breaking the law, and he lists some of those in this video. And their whole propaganda campaign about these ballot marking devices is truly contemptible. And you all are victims of that. Why do you think we all are fighting for hand-marked paper ballots? Because if the machine fails, please listen to this. If the machine fails, you can go back and see what the voter intended. And voter intent is the heart, the very heart of voting. If you don't know how the voter intended to vote, then you cannot audit those results. And that is why the computer scientists have stated that the ballot marking devices are not auditable. They have proven, listen to the word proven, in studies that voters do not check those receipts that come out of the machines. They cannot remember. They've done tests where they print out something that doesn't have all the braces on it. People can't remember when they glance down at a piece of paper. When you come out of the grocery store, do you notice if your carton of milk is not on the receipt? No. The whole logic of this is so simple, and people try to overcomplicate it. So I'm really pleading with you. Shelby County has a history of problems. I was there in 2010 when they put the May database in the August election. I helped Bev Harris investigate that election. You all have a history of problems, and you can solve it by getting hand-marked paper ballots, a good audit system. You will save money. It's proven in counties all over the country. So thank you so much. No, I'm 2:59. Now I'm 3. Thank you so much.
All right. Y'all want to keep taking people and keep popping up on there. You want to take this last speaker to be done?
Mr. Chairman, I for one, I'm willing to sit here long as I need to hear everybody speak. I mean, this has been a contentious issue. Yeah, contentious issue, and one that people are, I mean, we've heard the comment, they suspect what we've done. I'm sitting here, I'm willing to listen as long as people talk.
Let's go to the next speaker then.
Sarah Freeman.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
For the record,
Sarah Wilkerson Freeman, 7684 Applehawn Lane, Germantown, Tennessee. In December 2019, Knox County officials voted to spend $1.44 million to purchase a voter hand-marked paper ballot election system. Why? Because voters were extremely concerned about the possibilities of their elections being hacked and preferred to have a secure and verifiable system of hand-marked paper ballots. This morning, I spoke with a Mr. Davis, who is an in-the-trenches Knox County election official, and he explained to me their new system. At each early voting site, There will be ballot-on-demand printers, probably 2. After early voting, election staff will have some idea of approximately how many voters in each precinct have voted and how many have not. So on election day, when voters vote at their designated precincts, pre-printed ballots will be available based on the approximate number of voters who have not voted, plus some for spoilage. So there is no reason to have varieties of ballots available for early voting, nor to have large numbers of extra ballots on election day. After a voter marks their ballot with a pen, bubbling in the votes, the ballot is fed into a scanner to create a digital copy. The original ballot is dropped into a box. Those with disabilities use a touchscreen to vote, but that completed ballot is then printed out on regular paper, not thermal, which no one has discussed, fed into the scanner and dropped into a secure box. It will cost money every election year to buy paper and haul it to the voting sites, but they won't have to haul voting machines anymore, just the scanners and printers. Local people will be hired to do the hauling. If there are challenges to an election, the digital images of each ballot and the original hand-marked ballots should make recounts faster, easier, and reliable. Most importantly, the preservation of voter confidence was the determining factor in Knox County. The Board of Elections decision made that purchase. Please do not make the mistake of purchasing hackable voting equipment that is expensive, unreliable, and immediately outdated. There is a far better option. Why wouldn't you choose it? Knox County officials came up with solutions to the logistical challenges of their new system because their voters were their paramount concern. Perhaps Shelby County voters deserve the same consideration. And parenthetically, if there's going to be a modification to the building, Ms. Phillips, will you please create a room where the absentee ballots, you will have many more, can be.
Who's the next person?
Let's try, this is, it says Steve Mulroy, but I think this is Jake Brown. Oops.
Who?
Where do you go?
Jake Brown, will you raise your hand again?
There we go. Thank you. Okay, Jake Brown.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. This is Jake Brown. I'm a Memphis attorney. We got to say, you know, I don't have nearly the expertise or the time studying this thing as a lot of folks who spoke, but I know enough to know that a whole lot of what I heard from Ms. Phillips is just nonsense, right? It doesn't add up. I'll just hit a couple points, but, you know, Ms. Phillips seemed to suggest at one point that, you know, folks like me who are in favor of voter marked rather than machine marked ballots, maybe we're just smarter than the people who really have problems filling this out and these things out. And, you know, I guess I appreciate the compliment, but I'm not buying it, right? If it would imply that the people of Knox County are smarter than the people in Memphis, at least the voters. And don't know if y'all have ever been to Knox County, but I have, and I don't think that's true. No offense to any UT grads, my wife's one. But the other statement is the other part I really noticed was the wholly conclusory statement, without any support, that there's no difference in risk of tampering between voter marked and machine marked ballots. And the only explanation for that was that there was risk on both sides. It was just different. But the fact that you have some level of risk on both sides does not imply that that level of risk is equal. Otherwise, there'd be no point in wearing seatbelts. But we do, and for a very good reason. And I'll just say that I think that the utter lack of a reasonable basis to reject hand-marked ballots is suggestive of bad faith. And I would ask this commission to get back in its lane and listen to the Shelby County Commission. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, sir.
Let's see if I can get P. Moses on. He hasn't raised his hand, but I see him here. I'm going to try to get him on.
Yes, this is Ms. Moses. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
My name is Pamela Moses, 140 Adams. That's where I spend most of my time, 38104. And I'm a proud graduate of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And if you go look in Knoxville, you can see a whole lot of improvement from when I graduated into what's going on now. But on November the 12th, I was arrested at the Chicago O'Hare Airport, and I noticed TSA with gloves and masks. I didn't think anything of it until I remember seeing the Chinese people shutting down the airport because the government was trying to force them to do something they didn't want to do. The Chinese students told the media that they love America because we have a democracy that we are fighting for there over in China. They're fighting for democracy that we have. But they believe that because we have free elections. I'm not sure what any of you commissioner, Miss Phillips. Okay, yes. I'm not sure if any of you commissioners have been promised something or that you stand to gain something, but I hope you all watch the show on Netflix called Containment. Over the next 6 months, we're going to deviate from the right side to the wrong side. I don't know what side either of you are on. But in the Netflix movie Containment, the police were in charge, then the military. But after the 30th day, people had to pick what side they're on because they wanted to feed their family. They wanted to continue to eat. We live in a free democracy today because of the way we vote. And if you want to compromise that by choosing something other than hand-marked paper ballots, then you can do that. But just remember, if this RFP process fails, just so you can get a contract to feed your family, it ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun, because in the real containment, it will be the police and the military who will need the citizens of Shelby County to stand together with them, not fight them. So remember, before you cast your vote today, I'm a part of the rising majority, an oppressed Black woman in North Memphis, and it's way more of us than it is of y'all. And we pledge our allegiance to this country because it's a democracy. And if you don't choose democracy, then you choose oppression, and my people gonna get free. So you know what's going on. I've watched this meeting the whole time. I've seen you cut your deals on the side, and you won't even address my issue, which is old business. Commissioner Taylor was nice enough to tell me he would do it at the next meeting. But after watching the way, I agree with George Monger, and I don't never agree with anything he say. But y'all do not have the decorum of people that should be leading this city into a free election. And if you allow an outsider like Linda Phillips to dictate what she wants, you might as well let Pence and Trump do it themselves. We need something safe where we don't have to come in contact with anyone.
Lulu President.
No, I spoke.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna put your hand down.
Did we hear from her or just read her comment?
No, she's supposed to.
Okay, that's what I thought.
She keeps putting her hand back up. I think that covers everybody. I'll let y'all look.
Her microphone has got the hand. I think we have the mayor on.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that looks like it concludes the comment section.
There's more questions, but I don't know if y'all want to deal with those.
I've been watching that. We'll do a handful. Mr. Chairman, do you want to read through those real quick? Where did we leave off? I remember the one about Linda Phillips, and then John, that one there, I think is the newest one we haven't read. Carmen Johnson, so John Ryder is so entrenched in the National Republican Party, how can he be impartial? Okay. Some of these are just raising a hand. I can make my own statement. My hand's been raised up with the number. Sorry, John, there's another one about you. For 20 years, you have receiving substantial check. For 20 years, you have represented the Democrats. We know you are a Republican to the bone. You will direct the Republicans to do the right thing and vote for paper ballots. That's from Carmen Johnson. We've already heard from Ms. Moses, Mr. Mulroy, Dean Norler, who we attempted to get on the phone. Says only Shelby County residents should be making remarks on this issue. They are not familiar with laws, customs, and expectations of this county. They would certainly understand if we went to their county hearing to make recommendations. That's from Ms. Norler. Jake Brown, we heard from, and Ms. Moses, we heard from. And that's all the written comments. Mr. Chairman.
Barbara Williams.
Barbara Williams. Barbara Williams. All right, let's hear our, we'll cut it off.
Barbara Williams, you're free to speak.
Go ahead, Ms. Williams. State your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Speak up.
Can you hear me?
Barely hear you.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Okay. Well, this is Barbara Williams, Shelby County. I attend your election commission meetings regularly. And also, several years ago, I attended the vendor demonstration and spent a number of hours there at the vendor demonstration for election, for voting machines. And my choice at the time, with no influence from anyone else, was for a ballot marking device. And I feel confident in that system as a voter. I'm also puzzled as to why so many out-of-town speakers are addressing a local issue, but I just don't understand that. I will support the choice of the local election administration team, and whatever that choice is, I will vote with confidence. So please go ahead and call for the vote and end this meeting. Thank you.
What do y'all want to do that?
Mr. Chairman, I had one question that came up in the comment section and from Commissioner Smith that really never got addressed. And that's the issue of whether or not the new voting system is being supported by Windows 7. If you could address that. Sorry?
It currently is in Windows 7 because of the length of time that it requires to develop and test and get certified. Windows 10 is coming. My preferred vendor would not charge for that upgrade. Upgrades are handled very carefully. But, you know, there are some people in the election industry that don't think that using Windows 7 is a particular problem because you never hook to the internet. So, you know, security patches, you know, you're never having been touched by any outside influence. So there's not a lot of unanimity on that as a big
So although it's supported by Windows 7, they are working on an upgrade to Windows 10, which they will provide us at no additional cost. So that's the vendor you're recommending.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I got an interjection, that's actually great. How did the ballot styles be put into ballot marking devices?
What was the question? I couldn't hear you.
How did the ballot styles get put into the ballot marking devices?
They are on USB drives that are specially encrypted. They're American made. They're only one. They are hacked. Security hashes on them.
Where do they come
from? Manufactured in the United States.
How do they get configured? Where do you configure that USB drive?
The isolated ballot creation computer. No.
It's created. How does it create?
The ballot is created.
There is a computer that creates the ballot image, and that computer is connected to the internet.
No.
Okay, I'll submit that in the record.
Mr. Chairman, I move the previous question.
All right.
I guess we've got a motion back.
Yeah, we call the question.
Yeah, the previous question means,
Call for the question. We got a previous question takes precedence over the main motion. You have to vote on the previous question, which would have the effect of ending debate.
You can do it without objection.
Okay.
I'll do it without objection. So now we'll go back to the main, we got a motion on the floor in a second. The motion is to pick the ballot marking devices.
Yeah, the motion, Mr. Chairman, is to adopt the recommendation from the county election administrator, which is for Company One, which is ballot marking devices. And with the understanding these ballot marking devices also have the capability, which we can decide later, to count hand-marked paper ballots, if we so choose to do that.
So that is an option, two options, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Second. I got a motion by Commissioner Taylor and a second by Commissioner Yule. Okay.
So I have electronic means that I would call there.
Mr. Taylor, you originally, your motion, I just want some clarification on your motion. I know you were trying to amend your motion to, your previous motion didn't do it, your original motion didn't do it, but you were trying to allot for the option for a voter to request, and that wasn't in your original motion.
Well,
voter to request the option to vote with.
But I think it was in my original request only because the machine
Has its
its
capability.
capability.
But the other motion, when you make it explicit, she has to prepare elections to have the paper available. It has the capability, but if you don't buy any paper, doesn't matter if I request it or not.
No, as I understand, she has to provide paper ballots anyway.
That's right.
Yeah. And so
There won't be an
what,
absentee in the public.
no,
I have to provide emergency paper and provisional ballots for every polling place.
So you'll have enough of it?
I'm gonna have to look at quantities, but yes, I mean.
Okay, as long as your motion covers it. I just want to make sure.
because I want to keep in spirit of the county commission, which, they're the ones who are going to ultimately approve this contract. And I want to demonstrate a good faith effort that we're moving their direction.
Let me correct one statement. They do not have ultimate approval.
I didn't say that.
I thought you said.
No, I didn't say that. They're the ones that actually will approve the contract.
Great.
That will purchase the machines.
They approve the funding for the contract.
Well, but they'll have to approve the contract as well.
That's true. They have to approve it. You have the exclusive right to select the.
I'm not debating that. What I'm saying is that the county commission, they will approve the contract and appropriate the funding for the contract.
That is correct.
Because the contract's over $50,000, the mayor can't do it on his own, unlike on the city side, the mayor can issue a contract without approval of the city council. And
I wanted to be sure we were clear on that point.
Right, I'm in agreement with you, but again, I don't want to pick an unnecessary fight with the county commission because I want to get this approved so we can perhaps get it in place for the August election. And I think the motion as stated with the ability for a voter to opt out and choose a paper ballot is a step in their direction, and hopefully they'll see it in the spirit in which it was intended and quickly approve the funding for the
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, so we got a motion to accept, for administrative recommendation, company number one, ballot marking devices.
And so,
In a second. Okay, I'm gonna call the roll on the vote.
well, I'm sorry. When you say ballot marking devices, it sounds like you're just limiting it to just that, right? But from what he described, it appears to me that he's saying that there should be an option. So I want to make sure it's clear.
So what he's saying is that machine will read either one.
Okay.
Yeah, but nobody will do anything better than that. Okay, you got the ballot. You got to do any other.
So that would be, so that option would be available.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Okay. We'll call the roll on the vote. Taylor,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Tate,
Yes.
Smith,
No.
Stampson, yes. Okay, got 4 votes for 1, it passes. Okay, we call for adjournment? Okay, I got a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we're adjourned.